Shalom, shalom, family. Peace and blessings. This is Elder Uriah coming to you live from Soul Division Debate League. Shout out to the league, man. Shout out to Solomon, Commissioner. Shout out to the judges. Shout out to the debaters. Shout out to those who tuning in. Shout out to chat. Shout out to the supporters, man. And shout out to Domo. Shout out to Malak on what I felt was a really solid debate. Shout out to Domo, classic Domo. Might have been a little rusty, but still classic Domo. Definitely put that work in. Malak, hey man, they got to look out for you, fam. They got to look out for you, fam, because you did your thing last night, fam, and they definitely need to watch out for you, man. No doubt. So, as you guys see, I just wanted to touch on the Ahmaud Arbery verdict a little bit. Just really wanted to hear you guys' thoughts on that. And pretty much talk about what we got going on here. And pretty much talk about what you thought. I know, a lot of people felt we got some positive verdicts. Some positive things came out of that. But where are we really in this country when it talks about Black injustice? Where are we really at with that? And then I want to talk about where's the outrage in the Black community when we have issues where we have high crime rates in our community, where it seems as though African American in this country and a certain sect and certain group have a disregard for human life. I'm not one to travel into the waters of Black on Black crime. I think that is a racist ideology. We all know what the statistics show, that crime is higher among every race. White on white crime is high. Black on black crime is high. Asian on Asian crime is high. And that's because of proximity and opportunity. This country is still very segregated. So crimes that happen that are committed by Blacks against Blacks is usually because of proximity and opportunity. And it's the same among whites, proximity and opportunity. So I don't really deal with that in regards to that argument when people say, well, what are we going to do about Black on Black crime? The question is what we're going to do about crime overall, right? But what I'm talking about here is in the aspect of Where is the daily outrage? Or how can we express it? Or is there outrage, but it's not projected, it's not shown, it's not reported on? Is that conversation being had in our living rooms, at our kitchen tables, on our jobs, um, you know, at the football games? What is that conversation being had, right? And I want to do this really quickly. Um, just a brief conversation, just a brief conversation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link in the chat because I really wanted to have a conversation with people about this. I really just didn't want to throw out a lot of different things, but I really wanted us to discuss it. All right. So the link is in the chat. Please, we're going to have a honest discussion, an open discussion. Everyone is welcome as long as we're going to be discussing the topic at hand. Right. And why are we only outraged when white men kill black men? Where's the national coverage when a black man kills another black man for simply driving into the wrong neighborhood? Where's the outrage about that? And like I said, I'm not talking about black on black crime. That's not the underlining issue here. That's not the conversation I'm having. I'm talking completely specifically about the outrage. Right? I know there are protests and there are groups out here. In I know in Chicago and in Detroit, you have I believe it's New Era. You have those brothers and sisters that are out protesting and marching in the neighborhoods. But where are our quote unquote black leaders, our constituents, our state officials, right? Where are the people on the block who has witnessed murders and robberies and killings day after day after day after day in our communities? I know some of them are afraid to speak out because a lot of the murders, I believe the statistics show, are often drug or gang related. And so people out of fear. Is that one of the issues? Is it a fear? Or is it this thing that we often hear, especially among our youth a lot of times, and even among our older generation of people who are home alone a lot of times, who are elderly? Is it this thing of how impactful is having this discussion on a national on a local scale and bringing it to a national scale? Is it this thing of where we live by that code in our communities where we say snitches get stitches, right? That code of silence. Is it our adverse reaction or dealings or untrustworthiness in dealing with the police? Is it mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers not wanting to see their sons and daughters being locked up and locked away or incarcerated if they speak out against the violence in the local communities? Where is the outrage? I've seen a number of reports, news reports, television reports, uh, newspaper articles, and different things about the outrage of these three white men in Georgia who murdered, and we can say that without the shadow of a doubt, who murdered an innocent black man. We saw the outrage. A lot of us felt the outrage. A lot of us felt the outrage. Peace to you, Monster Mouth. I know who you are, brother. How you feeling?
Everything good, big Yara. I'm feeling well. What about yourself, man?
Pretty good, fam. Pretty good, fam. I was hoping you would get on because I know you have a little bit of background and insight on this topic. From personal experience.
Yes, sir.
Uh,
Yes, sir.
I was glad you popped into the chat because so you can bring some context to this conversation. But just give me a few minutes, bro.
Yes, sir. I'm good.
Um, and where is that anger? Is it drowned out by fear? Is it worth it? The people that are witnessing and live it day in and day out, is it worth them speaking out against it if no one's there to protect them when they do? Is that a part of it? Our men and women, we live in fear, not just in traveling this country because of possible lynchings or modern day lynchings, which is what we saw unfold with the Ahmaud Arbery case. So, in peace and blessings to his family, um, and may he rest in peace. Um, that was nothing but a modern day lynching, and without video, we would have never seen that. We would have never seen it, and these men would have never been convicted. Um, so where is the outrage? Why is it that I don't believe that we accept it. I don't believe that we welcome it. I don't even believe that a majority of us are desensitized to it. Even though we hear tales of our youth saying, I didn't expect to live beyond the age of 20 or 21 or 25. But no one's speaking out. No one's reaching out. No one's waving the red flag in these communities. And if they are, why are they being overlooked? Why are people turning a blind eye if the red flags are being waved? Is it that people feel wholly unsafe and unprotected in these neighborhoods when they see crime, when they see murder, when they see rape, when they see things going on, that they feel like it's safer for them to remain silent than bring attention to these issues? What has to be done? What needs to be done? Because it leans towards the more racist argument that if blacks don't care about themselves, then why should anyone else? Which is a completely racist argument to have. It overlooks the financial disparities and economic disparities and education and disparities. It overlooks all of those things that are created by systemic racism in this country. It overlooks all of those things. But even living inside of these institutions, are we yet not responsible for our own? Are we yet not responsible for our own? And this is an open panel discussion. I'm not going to be on long, but I just wanted to talk about it. I'm going to put the link in the chat again. Like, why are we not showing the level of outrage? Even during the Rittenhouse trial and verdict, we saw people outraged because he was found out guilty. People were outraged over that. Burning cars, breaking windows, marching, blacks and whites. But where does that happen in our communities as a whole, where it garners national attention when another black man murders another black man, an innocent black man, or another black man murders another black woman? Where's the community outrage that we see when whites kill blacks? Where are we with that? Shout out to you, Dzali. You've been hearing what I've been talking about a little bit.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Share with us, brother.
First and foremost, I want to thank you for even having this much needed discussion, because I feel we need to have this and other talks about this subject. As far as the subject go, me, just in my personal humble opinion, from what I've seen from both sides of the tracks, from the street sides and from the law enforcement side, the conclusion that I've come to is that it's almost as if we've constructed a bubble that we try and live in, whereas we're separate from what we see as the system. So we react differently to crimes that happen within our personal private bubble, which is the black community. And, we react in a manner whereas it's within the family, the black family. When a crime, a murder happens outside of our bubble, committed by white America, Asian America, whatever, is just like someone outside of the family committed that, and we make more of an uproar about it. Now, that uproar is not simply because a stranger put their hands on one of our family members. It's also a shout for attention, a nationwide shout for attention, a spotlight. Hey, someone outside of our family has put their hands on my brother, on my sister. The way that we react to crimes within our bubble is problematic in the same way that other things happen that we don't talk about much. Molestation, rape. Families keep those type things quiet and secretive too. If you pay attention to it, that's something else that we may want to have a talk about on a different day. Molestation, I've personally seen that, whereas a child is getting touched, and instead of grandma turning that uncle in or mama turning that brother in. Well, let's just not talk about it, baby. Keep the children separate from them. So that attitude is very much present in the Black community, and we see it transfer to when um, blacks kill blacks. We've created almost a subculture that's upside down, if I dare say that. It's upside down in that we've created these codes that are detrimental to us. We've allowed certain individuals in our community to create these codes that are detrimental to us, if I dare say, Yara. I'm hesitant to say that we allow individuals to portray themselves as leaders, and they set standards that the rest of us started following when we should not have. This stop snitching, when most people don't even know what snitching is. Don't talk to the police, when you have no reason as to why you would not talk to the police, because you're not a criminal. So we allow people to place themselves as leaders, and they set codes and standards that everyone's trying to try and follow. When firstly, those people should not have been leaders setting those standards, and us commoners should not be trying to follow those codes and standards. And I'll stop talking right now to let you put in on it, Brother Yara. Or Brother Yara may be away from the mic, so I'll continue. You know, I say this humbly, because I don't want, I try not to impose my thoughts on anyone. So I'm simply sharing what I've come up with in my 40 some odd years on this earth, that I've gone over this topic. I typed something in the chat earlier. I said, cats have no problem killing other cats. It's when they have to go against dogs that they have a problem. And that's how I see our Black community as being. We don't have, just like we were saying, we have a totally different attitude when a Black man kills another Black man. I don't know if we see it as we're going to handle it internally, but that's not accurate, because you have brothers walking around with multiple bodies. And we all know these brothers walking around with multiple bodies.
Yeah.
No one turns them in. No one's talking to the police, dropping dime on them. And we allow this individual to continue basically terrorizing certain aspects of our neighborhood. I see that you're back, Yara.
Yeah, and I appreciate you, man. You brought up some really pertinent some issues here. Do you think a lot of this? I think what you were saying, that a lot of our aversion to not displaying such outrage in our communities as a whole, when it comes to the violence that we see, is it because we still are not trustworthy of the police, of law enforcement in our communities?
We're definitely not trustworthy of them. My question would be, and it may be a rhetorical question, my question would be why? Because we definitely have reason in some aspect to not trust them. But on the other hand, how much of that is paranoia and manufactured? Because we are not all criminals. All of us not out here slanging dope pushing product. So why are us commoners not trustworthy, not trusting them?
Yeah, I know that. I do know that a lot of people today, especially in our communities, are not trustworthy of the police, and for some very good reasons, as we've seen. Um, I think that one of the ways um, the George Floyd um, tragedy and his death, rest in peace and peace in power, and blessings to his family, is that one of the flip sides of that incident is that it even, I believe it even fostered or created an even greater divide among African American people and law enforcement in this country, right? I think that even during the prosecution's trial in the George Floyd case, that we learned a lot about the blue wall of silence, right? Where police officers don't snitch on other police officers or they turn a blind eye. And we saw all that play out in video, right? And in the death of George Floyd. Even though in the trial we had law enforcement officers come out and say, look, we don't believe in this blue wall of silence, right? We heard that, but as we're looking at the video play out, and we see officer with his knee crushing asphyxiating or crushing the windpipe of George Floyd, we see the other officers simply not saying anything. So what we hear and what we see is two different things. And if you know, anything visual is a lot more powerful than a lot of times than what we hear, right?
Yeah.
So you could tell us that's not what you do, but if we're watching the white shirts and the blue shirts, right, out here, and they're simply ignoring uh, um, what their fellow officers are doing, then we're watching this on video. We're watching this. We watched I think three officers ignore a white officer kill a black man.
It,
Right?
if I can say something right there concerning that. Now, how I interpret that video that we saw, I interpret that differently, perhaps because I've been through the training, and what I saw there was not two other officers watch that one officer kill him. Well, yeah, they did watch, but the reasoning that they watched, my understanding was those officers were brand new, and that was the senior officer training them. So in situations such as that, and I could look at those officers and tell that they're not the assertive type. So they didn't have the balls to say, "Hey, Sarge, take your knee off his neck. You're killing him." They were kind of deer in the headlight. Almost, they were being trained. I think one of them, it was like his first day, and the other one, it was like his first week or something. So that wasn't actually the blue wall of silence. That was more, those officers were more than likely like, hey, I thought this was the procedure. We're just following Sarge. Not trying to make an excuse for them, but I know how a rookie officer is on their first day out on the damn street. I would also like to say that blue wall of silence, I think is crumbling. Of course, it hasn't completely crumbled, because from my personal experience, cops tell on cops more than damn anyone, you know. Hell, yeah. But I just wanted to interject that, observation about that situation.
Yeah, and I think that's important. That I think that there hasn't been enough. There hasn't been enough public interaction and public relations, especially within the Black community. I know that in certain sects and areas, um, been a concerted effort for law enforcement to really engage the community. I do often hear that in their effort to do that, it still is not as effective because there are not enough African American law enforcement or police officers that can go into these actual communities. But would that actually really help? Do you think that it's more beneficial for us to see more uh, non-African American officers in our Black communities to sort of build the trust? Because is it split in two parts when it comes to law enforcement, Dizali? Is it Black folks in the Black community don't trust police officers as a whole, as agents of the law, or do they trust Black officers more than white officers?
Yeah,
Or or is there a need then for um a program or something that we put in place where Black folks in our communities are 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 more trust needs to be more trustworthy of white officers? See, I'm really
mhm.
confused about that type of program because we
Okay.
don't have blacks, we don't have issues with our own, like, um over a span of years. Like, I'm from Chicago, right?
Mhm.
Um and we knew that there were black, we knew Black officers, on the first name basis, right? That would come
Yeah,
around, right? Because
yeah.
it was just easier for us to talk to. We knew, and just simply because they were easier to talk to, right?
Mhm.
But we also knew names of white officers that
Oh
would
yeah,
come to the community, but we knew their names for a different reason.
yeah.
You understand what I'm
I've been
saying?
through that. you know.
You know what I'm saying? Because
Mhm.
as a youth, I was involved, in street gangs, right?
Mhm.
Growing up in Chicago, right? And so, you know, we knew that there were certain white officers, detectives, and patrolmen that we would see, like, if they would stop you, you know, um, stop and frisk. They did a lot of that, in Chicago, growing up. They just pull you over, stop you, frisk you, see if you had any drugs or weapons on you, whatever. And then they try to scare you into giving them some information on different things like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if you got smart with them, you know what I'm saying? If you got smart with them, and it happened to me, they would take you, they would put you in a squad car, they would cuff you, throw you in the back of the squad car, and drive you to the rival gang's neighborhood and drop you off.
Yeah, I heard about that, man.
They would do that. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And so I know people that happened to frequently. It happened to me once. And they would just drop you off in their neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
then drive off.
Yeah.
They wasn't circling back. They would drive off. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? And so, like I said, we knew Black cops and white cops in the neighborhood, but for different reasons, right? So I'm wondering if sending more Black cops into neighborhoods, is that really going to be beneficial for us? Uh, because we don't have that, is because we don't really have that level of of untrust and distrust with black officers than we do white officers.
Now,
Should they be sending in more white officers to build that trust?
now, Yara, I will say that something that needs to be added to sending black officers into our black neighborhoods is that it probably really needs to be black officers that are from that neighborhood. Firstly, that's one of the first things that I would like. One of the first changes that I would like to see made, that an officer has to be from that zone that he or she is actually, trolling. That they would have to be from that zone and be familiar with the residents of that zone, as well as the residents of that zone being familiar with them. We definitely need more black officers. And when I say black, I don't mean black men that basically hate their own, community, because I've seen that where, yeah, that black man may be from here, but that black man hates us just as much as the damn white man, or maybe not hate, he just doesn't understand,
Right.
in the same manner that a white man doesn't understand. We definitely need more black officers just so that our black youth can become familiar with officers. Because thinking about it, growing up, I I really didn't know what a police was. I didn't think of them as normal, regular people. Part of the reason that I joined the force at the age of 41 was I was trying to overcome a fear that I had of, police officers. And that's just how I take care of things that I have fear of. I want to take it head on. So I wanted to get a understanding, because years prior, I had been on the other side of the law. I had multiple run-ins with damn officers, and I had a certain fear of it. But once I was accepted into that organization and I learned how it actually works, I don't have any fear of officers anymore. I know how officers think. I know what the culture is. And I think that one of the disservices that black people have suffered here in this country is it seems as though when we're not familiar with something, we'll move away from it instead of studying it and learning how it actually operates. I think that that's something that black people need severely. We need to understand how law enforcement works, not just from the outside, but from the inside. A lot of the incidents that we've seen in the media over years, where we've seen police killings, unnecessary killings. When I look at it, yes, I feel for my brother or my sister, but I also understand why it happened. And it's usually for like a damn simple reason. Like when I tell you don't move, don't move, brother. But at the same time, I understand that the brother has a certain fear or whatever. So we need to familiarize ourselves with it. So I think that is something that is very definitely needed. Can we have white officers around? Yeah, we're probably going to have some, simply because of numbers. There's more white people, so there's going to be more white officers. I think those white officers, though, they really need to be tasked with understanding those zones that they are patrolling, and not coming out, as I used to call it, big game hunting. because that's what a lot of white officers do. They'll live out on the damn suburbs, and they want to get assigned to the hot zones so that they can big game hunt. I'm, I'm going to find me someone who has those bricks on them. I'm going to find me someone who's terrorizing this, you know, neighborhood, and I'm going to damn lock them up. I'm going to bully the damn bully. That's the damn attitude that a lot of white officers had because they were bullied. And quite frankly, even though you've gone through the damn training and they've tried to build you damn hard up and make you damn brave, at the heart of you, you're still a coward, though. You're just a coward with a damn badge, you know. But yeah.
And that's interesting as well, because when we're talking about, you know, why does it seem like, or why we only, as black people, why we only outraged when whites kill blacks, or when white men kill black men, right? Why do you think we don't have that same level of outrage when it, or let me say this, is there the same level of outrage, or is it looked at different when black officers kill black men? When black officers kill black men, is the level of outrage in the community the same?
I don't think it's to the same level because it's a black man, but at the same time, you know, half of the black population will be like, yeah, he's a black man, but he's still an officer. So he's outside of our bubble. So he's part of that system. You know, that's how at least half of our population will see it. They no longer see him as simply a black man. So it's like he has 1 foot inside of our black bubble and 1 foot outside of our black bubble. So people are kind of type torn. You know, you will have some people who will see it differently. Well, it was a black man, so he was probably justified. But then you will have some people who will be like, I don't give a damn that it was a black man. He's an officer, so he's the damn beast. So he's outside of our bubble. So yeah, we're gonna march and damn tear it up the same way.
Interesting. Good points. Let me see here. Hold on 1 second. Let me see who this is joining the panel. We're just having a discussion on why we only outrage when white men kill black men. American Dream. Welcome to the panel. I'm not familiar with this tag name, but you can unmute your mic if you have something to add to the topic.
Yeah, peace. Thanks for letting me in. I guess I'm hoping I'm not off topic, but I know you guys were talking about whether or not we would be, the black community would be better off served if we had black police officers or police officers that live in our community. And I know for me, for example, I'm Jamaican, and in Jamaica all the cops are black, and for the most part they, especially where I'm from, the cops were from where we live. We knew them. However, Jamaica still has a very high crime rate. Like probably per capita, Jamaica has probably the highest crime rate, and we have the same mistrust or distrust for police. Like if you listen to reggae music, you'll hear it. We refer to police as Babylon, and we still have that same level of distrust or mistrust for the police, even though they look just like us and they live right amongst us. So I'm wondering if even if we got rid of all the white cops in our neighborhoods and replaced them with black cops, would that eliminate the mistrust we have for the police, or would it possibly even expound on it? I'm not sure, and I think that from my experience growing up in Jamaica, I don't know if it's that simple of a fix. I think that it's kind of deeper than that in on a certain level.
If I can say make a comment on what you're saying about the black police officers in your country, it's a little bit different because the police there basically are aligned with the government, which, to put it lightly, it does not have the best interests of its people at hands, if I'm not wrong, right? and they're
I
almost
guess
like
that
the
would depend
damn
on who you
military
ask.
there. Hmm?
I'm sorry. I guess whether or not what you said is true would kind of depend on who you ask. You know, there are some people in the community that, like I said, they think they have a deep distrust for the police, and do just say they're just working for the government, and they just don't trust them. But there is another side of the Jamaican populace that absolutely supports the police and see the need for it. They see the high crime rate and they see the need for it. So, you know, whether or not they feel that way depends on kind of who you ask, which I think is the same here as well. Because there are some people who are absolutely against defunding the police and want more police in the black community, whether those cops are black or white. Like, people just aren't concerned about that. They just want their communities to be policed.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think that's a great point you just brought up as well. Actually, even in even in our communities, we saw over the last year or so, we saw Kanye West and a few other celebrities, a few of statesmen, really going into this whole defunding the police. We saw it very heavily come up during the Trump campaign and different things like that. So defunding the police. I don't think that a lot of us in our communities really understand what the ramifications of that may have been, um, both positive or negative. I think that people in the African American community oftentimes, um, we want something done about crime. We want to live in safe neighborhoods. We want our children to be able to walk to school safely. We want violence against women. We want that to be stopped. Um, and so we want gang violence eradicated from our communities. Um, we want those things. We want to live in safe neighborhoods, just like every other race of people, every other demographic of people in this country. But when it comes to defunding the police, it's law enforcement's um, stance is that we need more uh, weapons. We need more eyes in the sky, i.e., these monitoring cameras that we see. We need um, helicopters flying over, as they say in some circles, that ghetto bird, right? We need that to order to bring the crime rate down and to capture offenders. We need to be more militarized, right? Um, because there are too many guns out on the street. There are too many automatic weapons and semi-automatic rifles and high-powered rifles and machine guns and different things like that. Uh, AK-47s and those things like this. Those things are on the streets, right? In the hands of people who are not looking to protect their community, but to actually commit crimes. So police feel like they needed more funding to upgrade their departments to become more militarized. And so, but we have this whole thing about defunding the police, right? Um, so how do we sort of sort of look to um, establishing positive relations with law enforcement in our communities if we have um, major celebrities and people like Kanye West saying, "Hey, look, because of the George Floyd incident, we need to defund the police. You know, we need to, take away from their ability to patrol or protect, or some even think overprotect our communities." Um, do you think, do you guys, both of you guys, I'm gonna ask this question, do both of you guys really think that defunding the police in these particular areas actually a good thing, or is it, or has it been working against us?
defunding the police, like you said, we have pros and cons to it. I think it will have mostly cons because in this country, the police are very much necessary. You know, everyone who has a sane, rational mind would agree with that. Now, where we may not disagree with it is that, you know, some of the equipment that they have may become a little bit excessive. You know, if they have, you know, robots and drones and et cetera, et cetera. But the police are very much necessary. Defunding the police, if you think about it, will be the people that are a detriment to the community dream. You know, I can boom out of my damn trap house 24/7, you know, and that's good for me and that's bringing in money for me, but that's terrorizing you who's trying to damn go to work and trying to send your kids off to damn school. So I think that a large portion of our people are fighting against their own interests. You aren't trapping. You aren't, you know, selling girls. You aren't doing this or that. So why are you yelling for the police to be defunded? Your business, your corner store that you're trying to damn run, it only runs halfway decent because people who don't plan on working, don't plan on doing anything except robbing. They are hesitant because the police may come and get them off of your ass. You know, so people are fighting against their own self-interest when they actually think about it.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I'm opposed to defunding the police. Because again, like I think if we look at cities that did go into defunding the police, I think that they reversed that position really quickly because of the rise in crime that occurred because of it. And I think what you said earlier in terms of all of us wanting, to have safe streets and all of us wanting, to reduce crime in our neighborhood. I think that's absolutely true. But I think a part of the problem is that we really don't take responsibility for why we don't have safe streets and why there's so much crime in our community. And I think that, when we say that we like to I think the title of the show is "We Get Outraged when someone white, when it's a white person doing it in our community." But and I think the idea that was being laid out is that we don't necessarily get outraged when we see black on black crime, and that's true as well. And I think that's a major part of the problem in terms of why there's so much crime in our community is that, I think we just don't take responsibility for it ourselves. I think, we'd rather, I think it's easier for us to blame kind of white supremacy in a way and blame the police and blame stuff external to our community for why our community is in the position it's in. And, I kind of wholeheartedly believe that if we fully take responsibility, we'll fix it so much easier than if we try to place blame on everything outside of ourselves. And I'm convinced that is a major part of why we don't see the results in our community that we really want to see, is because we're not at the point where we're really willing to take responsibility for the position that our community is in.
You know what, brother? Yeah, and Elder Yara, you know, I'm gonna just say it blatantly. We're talking out both sides of our mouth when we say that we want our neighborhoods to be safe, but at the same time, we will know that DZ, you know, a couple houses down has a damn booming ass trap house, and we're fine with him having that booming ass trap house. We accept the um occasional shootouts that happen round the damn corner from us that has our kids ducking and possibly getting hit. So how can we say that we want a safe neighborhood, but at the same time, we're not getting dope dealer Deezy up out of the paint. We're not getting Naldo, who has 5 bodies, up out of the paint. So we're talking out both sides of our mouth when we say that we want a safe neighborhood.
Yeah, before we get into it, I appreciate both of you guys' comments. Let's move and let's continue to move forward in the conversation. Let me welcome Inyame to the panel. Appreciate you, family, for joining us, man.
Yeah, peace to the panel.
Yeah, so you've been listening. We're talking about why are we only outraged when white men kill black men, and we are those in the black community. So that's where we are. We sort of segued into discussing law enforcement and their interaction in the black community, and sort of the pros and the cons with that, and just most recently talking about defunding the police. You have any thoughts on that before I segue? Because I want, because American Dream actually brought up something that I really wanted to get into next, and that's talking about where does the responsibility and accountability lay when it comes to the violence that we see in our black communities. So I want to kind of segue into that, but go ahead, Nyame. Floor is yours, family.
Well, peace to the panel, to the chat, Yara. I lived in New Orleans, and I think we really need to study New Orleans in the 90s, the late 80s into the 90s. That was a black city, predominantly black. We had a black mayor, a black police chief, a predominantly black police force, predominantly black population. Good morning. And we still had the high crime. We still had the same problems as a white city would have. And I don't think it's an issue, should we defund the police or should we give them more money? This segues into what you getting ready to talk about. I think we have a serious culture problem, a serious culture problem. Somewhere along the line, we lost control of our culture, and we don't know how to get it back. And I don't have an answer. If I did, I would have solved the problem. If we don't get a hold of our culture, it's going to continue, because crime does pay. It pays on both ends. It pays on the people in the street. They're getting money, and it pays the police, and it pays the prison system. So we have it's a huge issue, but to me, it's from a cultural standpoint. Do you guys understand what the point I'm trying to make?
I definitely do.
Absolutely. I would agree with that 1,000%. I think that, at some point we have to, like you said, look at our own culture and look at our own selves and really evaluate it and say, man, are these the positive results that are they creating the positive results we want? And, they really are not, especially in my estimation. The hip hop culture is a really, really negative culture. Like, most hip hop songs talk about negativity. And we kind of have to, evaluate that, because a lot of what we do now is based around hip hop culture. A lot of the violence in our community is geared around hip hop culture. And, if we're going to be honest to ourselves, and evaluate it, the change is going to have to come from us in terms of, and, a lot of people say, and let me just try and get this point out, and then I'll get back to why I think hip hop is important. But in the black community, we refer to each other as nigga, like as if it's nothing, right? In my estimation, I don't think that's a good thing for the community at all, and I think that's a major part of the reason why we're not advancing. And and I think that, in honesty, when we do refer to each other as niggas, in a negative tone, however, and But it's rampant in our culture now. Some people would say that that's a result of white supremacy, but in my view, I think that if black people made the decision today that they're not going to use it anymore, that they're not going to accept it being used in music anymore, they're not going to accept it being used in movies anymore, because it's used it's everywhere, right? But if black people stood up and said we're not going to accept it anymore, it would stop instantly, right? And I think the same is true of a lot of the stuff in our community with hip hop music. Like if black people were to say we're not going to accept that type of hip hop music anymore, it would stop instantly. And I think that that would kind of help us to realize that white supremacy is not as great as it is, and it only is as great as we allow it to be, right? And like when we fix our problems, we'll realize that it really wasn't white supremacy. It was really up to us all along. And white supremacy was just like a cloud in our mind that was kind of, not letting us see really what was happening in front of us. So yeah, just to say, I agree totally that it is because of our culture, and our culture is created by us. Like culture is something that comes from within a people, just from their living or their liberty, as Jamaicans would say. But that's what culture is, and I think you're absolutely right. That's what we have to focus on.
If you think about it, we all know when the transition took place. We can just about put our thumb on it. When the country raged war on whom our proper community leaders were back in the 60s, early 70s, and they locked them up or killed them. Like I said earlier, we then let people who should not have been leaders become leaders. We let gang people or criminals, etc. They de facto became leaders of our communities, and they set codes and rules that we're still living by now. They set culture that we're still living by now. So our culture problem is that we have people who are in place as leaders who should not be leaders. We let entertainers, and hell, some just straight up criminals. They are, may not officially be, but they act as leaders for our community, and they're setting the culture, the rules, the damn code. So that's the first thing that we have to address. We have to get our people to understand that no, Big Meech is not a leader, is not to be celebrated. Whatever rapper, that's not a leader. What that rapper is rapping about is not code, is not a rule. So that's one of the first things that we can and we need to address properly. We have to get our culture from being upside down. Somehow, well, I just presented something that shows how, but we have to get our culture from being upside down.
I think you make a great point there. All of you have, which leads me into one of my next questions here. Right, I'm sharing my screen right now. And this is, let me kill that really quickly. And this is, hopefully we can see it pretty good. This is the article, fans in disbelief of the ticket prices of Drake and Kanye West Free Larry Hoover concert. We know who Larry Hoover is, and just to segue off, piggyback off what Dazali was just saying. We saw in the 60s and the 70s our prominent black leaders assassinated, murdered, taken out, and what replaced them were the criminal element, so to speak, for the lack of a better term, whether we're arguing about whether it had to do with survival in the streets or whether we knew what they did at one point, in order to protect their neighborhoods. But a criminal element added to it, and one of these leaders we see here was Larry Hoover, that operated in Chicago, right? And so, but look at what we see today, right? We see Kanye West, right, and Drake is on a campaign to free Larry Hoover.
I'm sorry, bro. Can you speak a little bit about who Larry Hoover is? Because I really haven't heard about him.
Okay, sure. Larry Hoover, uh, in the 80s was a gang leader, prominent in Chicago. Still has one of the largest street gangs of the Gangster Disciple gangs, or they call I think their growth. They're recently they're now moving into some positive things with growth and development. Is now their campaign. He's been an advocate for in recent years since his incarceration. He's been an advocate for peace on the streets, stopping gang violence. He's also written some books to teens and children in regards to self-positive images and not being involved in the types of things that he once was accused of and found guilty of in regards to murder and drug dealing, different things like that. So over the years during his incarceration, he's been pretty much been kept in maximum security, and in a lot of times solitary confinement, because I believe there were fears or charges or allegations that he was still running the street gang, the Gangster Disciple street gang, from behind the prison walls. And so, but now what we have is we have another generation of people, right? Another generation of our so-called hip hop. Drake and Kanye West, who's advocating for a pardon or an early release, basically espousing that now Larry Hoover is now he is a humanitarian, right, to some regards. They believe that him being out on the streets will help quash a lot of the gang violence that we see. So they're holding this big concert for him to bring attention. They're using their star power to bring attention to this case. And so I wanted to ask you, brothers, do you think that is a positive move? These brothers, Kanye West and Drake, bringing out or bringing attention to the case of Larry Hoover, and do you think it'll have a positive impact, his release, or are they hurting us? Are they hurting us by sort of glorifying Larry Hoover, and saying that he's a much needed leader on the streets?
I would say that I'd say that we probably wouldn't even have to go look as far back as Larry Hoover in order to make the point that it may not be a good thing, or to make the point you're making, because part of the criticism, at least that I've heard about the BLM movement, and whenever Black people protest, it's generally because of the killing of someone whose criminal history may not have been that great, right? Like any one of them that you can think of, George Floyd, Mike Brown, like generally these people, their criminal past was kind of sketchy, right? But we still rally behind them, and we put a lot of support behind them, and we kind of treat them as if they were innocent through it all, and so that has been the criticism that I've been hearing, like for a while now in terms of why is it that, you know, the Black community, why do we do that? You know, and is it a positive thing? I don't think it is. I don't think you do either. So I think I would absolutely agree with you that it's something that we should be reevaluating. You know, I've also heard the criticism that that, you know, whenever I've tried to suggest to people that hip hop music and hip hop culture is, you know, is really detrimental and has some really bad effects. They always say, you know, what about movies? Like when people watch movies or play video games, those are violent. Why don't you want to stop those? And I think that it's a very different dynamic with movies, because I hear the same thing when we talk about dance hall reggae music and its effect on Jamaica as well. You know, and I think the difference is that with hip hop artists and dance hall reggae artists, they actually live out day to day that character. They stay in character. When you see Vibes Cartel or in an interview, the the interviewer refers to him as Vibes Cartel, and he stays in character. The same thing with hip hop artists, like they stay in character, and the interviewer refers to them as their artist name, if you will. Now, I've never seen Sylvester Stallone in an interview where he's acting as if he's Rambo. Like, we know that there's a difference, and I think that hip hop music and the culture that we've developed, we kind of it's a different dynamic than with movies, and I think that that's why it's so dangerous, because we stay in character all the time, and we can't separate the artistry from reality. In a way, we have that whole negativity has become kind of intertwined into our reality, and that's why it's so much more detrimental. And I don't want to ramble. I can ramble at times, but just to say, I absolutely agree with what you just said. I do think that it's a bad thing that we honor and try to, protest on behalf of people who may not have had the best interest of our community at heart from the get-go. And that's a problem when we rally behind that type of thing.
Concerning Larry Hoover, firstly, I will say that we will not be getting what some people think we will be getting if he is free. There are some people who thought or think that freeing him, he would be able to get some type of control over the gang situation in Chicago. I've heard that point thrown out there, and people quickly countered that, and I agree with them. His time as being gang leader is over. These young bucks that are out there now, 13, 14, 15, 17, they will knock his head off just as fast. So those people who want him free for that simple reason, you can forget that absolutely. Now, also, as far as Drake and Kanye leading the campaign to damn free him, like I said, our community is upside down, man, and we have to do something to damn fix it. They are leading a campaign to free a man whom, for every good thing that he may have done for a select number of people, how many he did twice as many people bad, either directly or indirectly. See, those are the things that we have to take into account. But basically, our community is upside down. And I'll just leave it at that. Inyame, what you got to say on it, bro?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's gonna have I don't think it will have a negative or a positive effect. I think it's just neutral. As Dazali said, these young cats don't give a damn about a Larry Hoover. And they're probably trying to kill him the first week he's out just to prove they don't give a damn. The time has passed for Larry Hoover. Even if we resurrected Tupac or somebody, it wouldn't make a difference. Because I think it's a cultural issue. I don't know if you guys remember. I know you guys are old enough. Back in the early '90s, there was this lady in California. She came out. She said, "We gotta protect our communities. We can't be listening to this smut that's on the that's coming from our music." And I remember I was part of that generation. I'm like, "What is this lady talking about?" You remember? They got the bulldozer. They ran over the CD, and Snoop Dogg CD was one of them. He got mad and went on a campaign against her. But later on in life, he said, even Snoop Dogg said, she was right. Some of the stuff we were saying on the music wasn't called for. Now, I don't think music creates the culture. I think it promotes a bad culture, and then it inspires a bad culture. So the problems are already there, and music just exacerbates it. But going back to Larry Hoover, no, I don't think putting him now, should he be free? Yeah. If he's changed his life, if he's ready to do positive, he can come out. If he come out and help 10 people, that's a good thing. But I don't think it solves the overall problem.
Okay. So let me go just take a little step back, because I wanted to go into this when we were talking about defunding the police. I'm going to share my screen. And that's let me touch on some stats really quickly, right? So this is from Britannica, the procon.org. And it talks about defund the police, the top 3 pros and cons, right? And as we see here, we see the Black Lives Matter movement and defund police campaign. Especially when it came to Chicago, we saw Kanye West actually walked with these protesters, Black Lives Matter and defund police campaign. We saw that just as we see Kanye West involved in the Free Larry Hoover campaign as well. But I want to read a little bit of this, and I want to ask you brothers a brief question. It says, amid the Black Lives Matter protests following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota on May 25th, 2020, calls to defund the police began to populate protest signs and social media posts. While there are multiple interpretations of defund the police, the basic definition is to move funding away from police departments and into community resources, such as mental health experts, housing, and social workers. In the large scope of the civil rights movement, some advocates would reallocate some police funding but keep police departments. Others would combine defunding with other police reforms, such as body cameras and bias training, and others see defunding as a small step towards ultimately abolishing the police departments and the prison system. According to the most recent data available, police departments received about $114.5 billion nationwide in 2017 from state and local governments. That's up from $42.3 billion in 1977. Police budgets have made up around 4% of total state and local budgets since 1977. About 97% of police budgets go toward operational costs such as salaries and benefits. However, individual cities or counties may allocate more funds to police departments. The 2017 Los Angeles city budget, for example, provided 23% of the budget to police, while 9% of Los Angeles County budget went to policing. 64% of Americans oppose the abstract idea of defunding the police, while 34% support the movement. 60% are against reallocating police budget funds to other public health and social programs, while 39% are in favor. And that source is Kendall Carson. 64% of Americans oppose defund the police movement. Key goals poll, abcnews.com, June 12th, 2020, on that last stat. And so what I wanted to say here in regards to this particular article and the stats that we're looking at here is that, and Yame, you made a statement that earlier that crime does pay, right? And if crime does pay, then are we saying that it's a matter of economic disparity and survival, which we see high crime rates in our communities? And I believe the stat supports that to some degree. But wouldn't defunding the police, taking that $114.5 billion and putting that into social programs, mental health programs, food programs, housing programs, things that we see a lot of Black Americans in this country are struggling with, those that live below or at the poverty line. Wouldn't that help that? We know that it is lack of education and lack of economic resources that in certain communities, in the Black communities, that we know, in all communities, that those are factors that we see high crime rates. The crime rates are elevated when you have, when you have poor economic stability in those communities, and you have poor education programs in those cities. We know the crime rates are high. So when you say crime doesn't pay, wouldn't defunding the police, putting those monies, those billions of dollars back into the communities, wouldn't you think that would be a positive thing in defunding the police? I'm addressing the panel as a whole.
I mean, that part, yeah, I do agree. Because it's counterintuitive to just keep giving the police department money and crime continues to go up. I mean, if it's in the hundreds of billions, that's a big business.
That's a big business, isn't it?
Yeah, and then what about the prison system? What type of money is it invested in that? It's a huge business. And there again, Black people, we're holding the weight of all of that, but no benefits from it at all. So the point of communities, building the community, the guy Jordan Maxwell, I don't like everything he says, but that sticks with me, he says, you get what you pay for.
Right.
You get what you pay for. So if we invest in our children a better way of life, we get a better quality of people in our communities. It's that simple. Unless we are saying Black people or Black children are incapable of having successful communities, of having viable communities. And I don't believe that. It is an issue of what we are investing our time, our energy, or money, which is part of money. What are we investing into our children? What type of communities? And I'm gonna say this, as we end it with that. I remember watching a show of Mike Tyson, how he would just talk about how embarrassed he was of his life. But he was talking about growing up as a kid, going to bed hungry. He would just wake up angry because he was going to bed hungry. He was spending most of the day hungry. And he went to the juvenile detention center, and one of the guys in there taught him how to break into houses. And he says he was so happy because he didn't have to go hungry anymore because he knew he could break into somebody's house, either steal some food or steal something of value to sell. So poverty plays a huge role in it. And here's somebody like Mike Tyson saying, man, it would anger him to go to bed hungry and to be poor and it caused him to go into a life of crime and that changed his life, a life of crime. We know these things to be the case, but we don't invest into the inner cities because of some idea of communism and socialism and people hate that and living off the government.
Right.
But you're investing into your people a better way of life.
We
And so
finally getting it. Yeah. No, keep going. I mean, I agree with you. Keep going. I just want to add.
No. I wanted to end with that. I thought the Mike Tyson take. I forget the name of the show. I think a lot of people need to see it. What made Mike Tyson who he was?
Right.
All
right. And this is why I get so angry at the communist conversation or the socialist, or even at times some of the anarchist conversation. The problem in our communities is resources. The problem in our community is a lack of resources. You want to remove a lot of the crime in your community, create our own internal after-school programs, create our own trade programs where people actually have a skill. You just talked about Mike Tyson being happy that he could now break into houses because now he had a way to make sure he could eat. I think many of us either are so far removed or we're so desensitized to growing up. You know, we make jokes, but a lot of us grew up with what we call air sandwiches. You know, you ain't got nothing to eat. Mama say you ain't even eat today, basically. You know what I'm saying? Or if you're lucky, maybe you got a thing of biscuits left over or whatever it was, a sugar sandwich, you got some bread, whatever. This is real things that some of us really grew up with. And I say us because this is really at times where I grew up with this. And it wasn't until I learned how to make money in the streets where I felt a little bit of comfortability. And then once I learned how to actually create a business or work for myself or had a skill or a trade, that's when I knew, okay, I would never be hungry again. I might not be rich, but I'll never be hungry again because I have a trade, I have a skill that I can go out here and use to try to feed myself or feed my family if I'm building a family. The issue is the actual station in life that we have said that it's okay for many of our people to have in these inner cities. Until we get to a space where we're creating jobs or providing resources or providing ways of upward mobility, that's going to continue to happen. And then you're going to continue to have the split or the schism, watch this, of wanting to have proper policing in your neighborhood. Why do I say that? Well, if you don't have proper resources in your community, and then the drug dealers or the criminals, or whoever you view it as, are coming in and providing more resources than anyone else, there's always going to be that split in the community that's saying, well, yeah, I rock with so-and-so because he's teaching me how to eat. He's making sure that ain't nobody coming around here messing with me, putting food and money in our pocket. So what? They shot so-and-so the other day. So-and-so wasn't doing nothing to help us eat. Right. And so that's the fight that you're seeing in our community of the people who are saying, I want this element of destruction out of our community, but we have no more resources. And many of these people are providing the resources that we need. And until we go ahead, Master.
No, I'm patiently waiting, brother.
Okay. And I'm not saying that I agree with that space. I'm saying we have to provide something better. We have to provide something that gives our community this thing of hope, but not even just hope, tangible, literal food in your stomach, literal assistance for your grandmother when she needs help with her medicine, literal assistance with that single mother so she can either move up and get educated and get a better job while still making sure that her children are safe and not being raped or molested or improperly influenced to be angry and bitter at the world. So maybe she can go take a couple more shifts to be able to pay to get a class, to get her a little more education, to be able to do something in the society that's going to take her and her family out of the level of poverty. I'm not saying that I agree with how capitalism is used incorrectly, but I am saying that there is a thing that we have to conversate about and start to grasp of. We have to start to exchange capital at a rate amongst each other. We have to exchange finances and things like this at a rate that builds our community. If we do not invest in our community, you're going to see people continue to hate the police, because it's easy to point at the police when we should be saying we should be able to govern ourselves at this point. We should be able to govern our own communities at this point. And the only time police are involved is when we have something that's completely out of control. Until we get to that space, we're going to stay right here having these conversations because we have not provided something to get our people out of the current state that they're in. I yield right there.
And I want to pick up right there because you trailed off on right where I want to come in on, where you're saying that we should be able to self-govern ourselves at this point. Funding for our community, of course we need that, but I couple it with something else, something that in Yame brought up. Yes, we very much still need funding so that we can take care of our kids and provide them with adequate education and places where they can go after school. We have to couple it though with what in Yame was saying, that we have a cultural issue. Now, when I say that, I don't know how deep some of you got into the damn street life. I joined law enforcement at the age of 41. I got out of the Army at the age of 26. From 26 probably up until 35, I was knee deep in the damn street life. Everything you can think about, I was probably in it. And I had skills. I had skills to whereas I didn't have to do that. But culturally, with the influence from other people, from the media, from the actual community status, it encouraged me to live the life that I lived then, doing the crimes that I did then, with the people I was clicked up with. Just so what I'm trying to lead to, the kids now, they're not growing up how we grew up and we had to eat air sandwiches. Some of them have, well, not some of them, a lot of them have both parents. They're not growing up in the damn projects. They got a closet full of Air Force Ones. I'm talking about one of my own nephews around here kicking doors in, and he doesn't have to. He has both parents. He has money. He gets everything that he damn wanted. But he's still around here robbing, kicking doors in. That's where it leads to darn cultural. We had to do certain things because our lights may damn be off. Mama, mama working, daddy don't know what the hell daddy at. So we out joining gangs, doing crimes. So to level it off and end, it has, the economics has to be coupled with us properly addressing the cultural problem that we have to.
I'm gonna pick up right there when you're done. That's excellent. All right, bet. I agree, and that's why those programs, those after school programs, or those in school programs, things where they see something different. I'm not saying I'm giving up on the older people, but we have to start to invest in our younger people at this point. Like you said, you was 25. right? Or 26 when you got out the military. And then went into that space. And a lot of us do. We get out the military and we go back to what we know because there's no support system that says you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. There's no support system of that, right? Our support system tells us, yeah, man, all I got for you, you know, I got a couple pieces for you, you know what I'm saying? We can make a couple plays. And then next thing you know, you in there, right? And you starting to make moves and dig deeper and deeper until you feel like, okay, yep, I got the quote unquote American dream. That's the goal. Can I put away 6 figures in these streets? And hopefully, if I'm smart, I'll get out of the game. Then it never really happens, though, right? You're gonna consistently stay in the space of perpetual criminal activity until either you make a change or until somebody shows you something different. And that's what I think what we're talking about now is to change this culture. We should have our own internal media stuff. Like we should, with YouTube and all of this, we should have media around the clock that's not only showing us the bad things, but showing us the images. And this is why I get mad and say that some people are being what's the word I'm looking for when you're not being I love your hair, love. Nothing to go?
No, we're making a movie.
Okay. Yeah, my kid's making a movie right now. So when we move to a space where we say, man, that messed up my whole school of thought. We got to move into a space where we are providing a different image. Irresponsible media, that's the point I want to get to. We now have an obligation to not only present what's bad, but to present positive images. This is the other thing. Because we see so many negative images, we don't know that there are very successful Black people out here that are moving in these spaces where we can move into, right? That are doing things that can show us how to properly be the change that we want to see in our community. It's just really not enough of us at this point that are saying, I'm trying to be the change that you want to see in my community. And I don't have to get out here and attack the drug dealers and fight everybody because that's going to get you shot. You know that, right? All I got to do is be the change that people want to see. I got to actually give a damn enough to say, you know, at certain times I'm going to invest. I'm going to help in the after school program. I'm going to help with providing football. If you in the music, you can help try to create a nonprofit or partner with nonprofits who are bringing music to the cities. Different things that we can do in our community that are going to start to provide an outlet and just honestly let kids see not every man is out here saying, go have sex with as many women as possible. Not every man is out here saying, get this money and do all of the extracurriculars that we may have done. A lot of us men are saying, I've come out of that now. I did that. I know what it's like. And I'm telling you, there's a better way. And if we can move into that space, that combats a lot of the future issues. Now, the current issues that we have, that's something we got to talk about in private because, you know what I'm saying, I want to advocate for some of that stuff on my internet.
Yeah. I want to comment on one of, like, what's going on now. There's some ugly things that need to happen now to clean some stuff up.
Yeah.
And I don't want to talk. Yeah, I don't want to talk in public about what needs to happen.
Right. I agree, though. I agree. And you can let your mind run with that however you need to, but there are some things that need to happen right now that would immediately transform our communities in certain areas.
Right. Because we also, like we said before, to make a change in the inner city, we're cutting off somebody's money. A lot of money is getting made.
Facts.
So there's a war zone in the inner city.
Right.
And that's the element of the Black Panthers. A lot of people don't understand what was so deep too. They was moving into that because they had crime problems then. They was moving into the element trying to control that part also. So any moves we make in the inner cities now, we have to deal with that element. I mean, you got Italian mafia, Colombian, Russian.
Oh,
The Black
in
American.
the Bay, you got actual black mob, what we call it mob. Like you got black mob or black mafia, and
Yeah, I was
I ain't
naming
even
all of them. All of them that's there,
right.
along with the police force and the FBI.
And that's the other thing. The very people that we would maybe go to for protection are the very people that are profiting the most from those spaces. Or
Right.
not, right? And that's a whole nother conversation. Right? This conversation of corruption and how do we actually combat that? And I like the Ahmaud Arbery situation because I don't know if y'all kept up with it. I just had this conversation with my 17-year-old yesterday, and it tripped me out. In a house where I talk about these things regularly with my kids, they've seen so much of this over the last year. I'm telling my daughter, "Oh, I see you, man. I see you, man. All right." I'm talking to my 17-year-old about it, and she like, "Is that the one that got killed in the woods?" And I almost snapped, like, what do you mean? No. And she was like, "Okay, yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say it like that." She had to remind herself what happened because she's seen so many different situations over the last year and a half. But if you keep up with that Ahmaud Arbery situation, they made some substantial gains. Number one, in Georgia, they got a whole law change, but also they got a prosecutor who's now under federal indictment for improperly handling that case. Like, that's the type of things that we have to be fervent about. And I'm gonna give her props. Wanda Cooper Jones, who is Ahmaud's mom, was the driving force in it. She refused to quit. She refused to give up. She continued to fight to make sure that people did what they were supposed to do. And then you saw the lawyers. What's his name? Lee. I want to get his brother props, man. Lee Merritt, I want to say is his name, was just a staunch advocate for making sure that we saw the change just in that community. We can see that type of change in our community, but you're going to have to be bold and brave in order to make sure that you get the proper district attorneys, the proper prosecutors, the proper leaders in your community to rid yourself of the corruption that's dominating where you stay. And then I'll add this and shut up for real. If you're not equipped to do that, then don't do that, because that's a very dangerous space to get active in.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I can,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, American Dream. Glad you could join us back on the panel.
yes, sir. Me too. Yeah, I think because I was in and out. I kind of got kicked out. But I think where I got back and I was trying to, get myself caught back in. But I think, if I may, we were talking about taking responsibility and where do we go from here in terms of the Black community. And part of me really believes that the first thing we need to do is figure out what we mean by the Black community, right? By the Black community, like, what is it that makes up the Black community? Is it just because you're Black? And if that's it, like, what does it mean to be Black? Because I think that's the main thing we should be focusing on, is because that's kind of like the foundation. And in my estimation, the community has to be kind of built around some type of an idea that we all agree with. It has to be an idea or some type of a belief. Like, the Jewish community is built around their beliefs. The Chinese culture is built around their beliefs as well. And it's not just around their color. It's about something more. It's about their ideas about who they are. And so for the Black community at this point in my head, the only thing that I see that we're using to kind of call ourselves a community is the fact that we all are Black. And for the most part, I know I am. I think most people are kind of hard pressed when it comes to giving a good definition of what black means. I think we would all have a different definition for that. And so I just think that the most important thing for us to do at this point is figure out what is our community, and are we built around ideas, or is our community built around just skin color? And I think that a stronger community is going to be built around certain beliefs and ideas that we hold in common, not just the fact that we look alike. And so I think that, that's where we may want to start and focus on.
I think that's amazing. And I'll tap in real quick. We've had this conversation a lot around here over the last few years. And I think many of us have gotten to the point where we could speak to this from a position of somewhat sounding intelligent. And I'm ready and listen if people can add. But because the Black experience in this country has been so diverse, from people who have finances to overcome the oppression, to those who have come out of the mud to overcome the oppression, to those who are still in some way, shape, or form been oppressed every day with not even being able to eat. That experience is so diverse that to say, like you're saying, is it an ideology? Is it a skin tone? I think the space where we all agree is that the Black community has to now be galvanized under the auspice of removing systemic oppression. And everybody has their role to play in that, because what we have done in the past is said, well, if you have upward mobility, if you have financial gain, you're a sellout, or you're a coon, or you don't have the right to speak because you don't understand our struggle. And so that is ostracized and created a schism in our community, where we're saying, well, you're not really Black. Right? You speak proper, you do this, you do that, so you're not really Black, right? Nah, that ain't necessarily it. Right?
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead, brother.
I think, because I think at the beginning we were all kind of agreeing that, the most important thing is taking personal responsibility for where our community is. And I think we kind of all had a consensus on that. But now it sounds as if I'm hearing you say that we have to acknowledge that systemic racism exists. And, I'm wondering if that's not a contradiction. Like, it can't be, if we're going to take responsibility, we can't blame systemic racism or systemic oppression, right? I think that's kind of like, we have to decide which one we're going to choose to focus on, and which one we're going to, say is our focus point.
Great question. I would have liked to have finished, and maybe we would have got to the end of it. I think they both go hand in hand. All right. Our responsibility doesn't die because we acknowledge that systemic racism exists. Actually, our responsibility now becomes more focused. Our responsibility now gets its identity. Our responsibility now receives its actual direction by understanding how systemic racism works. So, for instance, when we understand that the laws are going to be much tougher or have more impact on us if we violate the law, then what we do is take responsibility and teach our children in our community not to violate the law, right? When we understand that it's going to be much harder for you to get a job in corporate America because maybe how you look or because your background, then we make sure that our children in our community are, one, much more educated and prepared to engage if they need to in corporate America, or they become an entrepreneur and they create their own path, they create their own way, and they learn how to practice group economics. See, this is what I'm saying. It's not a one size fits all to say, oh, because I'm saying that now we attack systemic racism, that now we're removing our responsibility. I think that's a cop-out. I think that they both go hand in hand. We cannot say that we have a responsibility and then not give direction as to what that responsibility has to be focused on. The responsibility must be focused on how we are actually receiving a lot of the problems in our community. And that does stem from systemic racism. But the outlier or the effect of that is how we have now destroyed our own personal community. We're not acting as though we don't have any problems. We're not acting as though we don't have many self-inflicted wounds. But what we have to understand is that those self-inflicted wounds did have a place of impetus, right? They had a place of beginning, and we have to discuss how to overcome that place of beginning in order to give our responsibility its direction.
I guess we'll have to, agree to disagree on that issue. I think that if we are going to say that our own culture, it's our culture that's the problem, and we have to fix our culture, then systemic racism is kind of something that's out of our control, and we would have to have the conversation of, or talk about systemic racism itself, and is that something that's really real? Is that really the reason why? Does that really have anything to do with, for example, because I've heard it said that systemic racism is the reason why the N-word is used by Black people themselves, and I totally disagree with that. So we can have a different conversation about whether systemic racism is a myth or not. I think that we would have to define exactly what we mean by systemic racism. But again, I think that my major concern with it is that it takes responsibility away from us or the people that are looking for the change. And it says, there's something outside of us that's causing whatever we don't want to happen. And, I think that that's a distraction. And I think it takes us away really from focusing on ourselves and fixing ourselves. Because I think that once we fix ourselves, man, we'll see this, whatever we think systemic racism is, I think we'll just see it dissipate and it'll just kind of go away because it won't affect us anymore. It only affects you if you allow it to. I think it's kind of one of those beliefs that we have that kind of clouds our thinking.
Just
Okay, watch
real,
this.
just
Hold
real
on,
quick.
let me
All right, go ahead.
push back real quick. The only reason I say that, and now we can get a little specific. So, for instance, if we want to fight education, we say we want to take responsibility in our education, right? One of the ways that systemic racism does that or attacks us is they attach school funding to property value, right? And so, since school funding is attached to property value, we don't know that we should make sure that our neighborhoods are at least clean. We don't know to make sure that our neighborhoods function a certain way so as to get more school funding to make sure that we have more, at least on the basic public school level, that we have more funds to go towards our school in order to make sure that we turn out more educated young Black boys and Black girls that go into a society being more responsible. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about systemic racism. To say that it doesn't exist, I don't get into the N-word conversation about somebody making us say N-word. Nah, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in terms of knowing that if we really want to fix it, it's deeper than just saying, hey, young brother, stop having sex with all those girls. No, they have to be taught why. They have to get taught how. They got to get taught what is actually being put in front of you to make you do that. Right?
Sure.
Why are you watching this television show that's teaching you to do this? Or why haven't we come together and create our own television shows that give you something to watch and something to go against? And then you need to know that as soon as you decide to create that, there's going to be a corporate economic pushback on you. That is systemic racism, and you need to be prepared to fight against that. You need to be prepared to have financial reserves with whatever you do in order to fight against that corporate pushback. That exists, and that is real, and we must be prepared to destroy that.
In terms of public education, I would agree that it's a problem to have. Well, not that it's it is a concern that school funding is tied to taxes, right? However, that's with public schools, right? So one of the things that we may want to and the same people that have a problem with the fact that property taxes are tied to schooling, those are the same people that have a problem with voucher programs or charter programs, which allow kids in poorer neighborhoods to go to schools in those more affluent neighborhoods, right? We kind of have a problem with both. And maybe if we really had a problem with the public school system and how it works, maybe the conversation should be about getting our children out of the public school system and keeping them out of the public school system, because we all know, like, maybe that's a major problem. Like most of the kids in the Black quote unquote community go through the public school system, and we all know that. But maybe we should look at it and say, what's going on there? There is a problem, and is the solution to continue to pump money into it and demand that we're pumping more money into that public school system that has been proven to be a failure? Or do we choose to say, listen, I'm going to take my kids out of that system and invest money elsewhere, or support programs that choose to say, let the money follow the child, let the child be able to take that money, whatever public funds would go to that child, let him be able to take it to another school. But again, we kind of have a problem with both of them. So we're kind of shooting ourselves in our own foot. And so if we are going to have the conversation about public schools and education, we can, but we should also, be ready to kind of have it on a broad level and let's take our kids out of the public school system, because we know what public policy or public whatever, which public thing works better than a private one. We all know that when things are done private by private people, we know that the results are better. But for some reason, we keep, for our community anyway, we keep pumping this idea of public everything as if it produces good results, and there's no history of it producing good results. But that's what we keep pushing for our community, and maybe we need to reevaluate that as well.
Brother, I just wanted to say real quick, if I've been following you two back and forth real closely, is that it's not always either or.
Facts.
A lot of times we like to choose either or. I don't think that it hurts our cause if we acknowledge that there are systemic issues. Yes, we definitely have to focus on our personal accountability, responsibility, but it doesn't hurt to acknowledge that the root cause of a lot of our issues is systemic white supremacy, etc. That's not taking away our personal responsibility to just admit that.
Sure, but I think we can. I just don't know if anyone has ever defined what systemic white supremacy is, right? And like, if you can give me an example of how systemic white supremacy manifests itself in public schools, for example, like give me an example of what you're saying is systemic racism. Is it because
preschoolers being handcuffed and
Right.
sent to juvenile hall for talking back to the teacher or chewing bubble gum or not sitting down in their chair?
Yeah, I can add to that.
We've had many people define what white supremacy is.
Right.
So,
And
what I don't
systemic
understand is why at this point we don't understand what it is. But go ahead, Ada.
No, and I'll tell you why we don't, because what you were just talking about earlier, the communist or the socialist manifesto conversation of almost moving beyond the space of saying, no, this exists. We don't rest and live in the area of saying, oh, because it exists, there's nothing we can't do. But to act as though it doesn't exist, and like you said, there have been many people to define it. No one maybe has defined it the way we want to hear it verbatim in every space. But for instance, how does systemic racism show itself in school? Black kids, by and large, are receiving more suspensions, longer suspensions than their white counterparts. Black and brown children are by and far and large more likely to receive disciplinary action at an unequal rate than their white counterparts. And what does that do? That now takes the kid out of school. It now alienates them. It puts them in fair position, a fair game to fall into the inner city trap. And all of that stuff also follows your high school record. So now it's probably less likely that you're going to get into a higher level of college education to be able to be equipped to attack this system. So to ask where it exists in all of those spaces. It exists because we don't have as many Black teachers as we need. We don't have as many black teachers that we need. So then black teachers or black students are constantly involved with white teachers. Not all white teachers are racist, so I'm not giving that blanket statement, but they're constantly coming in contact with teachers who don't understand where they come from, who don't understand what they do, who don't understand how they think. For instance, years ago, when we had the gifted and talented education program, there was corruption even found in how they were administering the test, with using different words that aren't used in the black community for the same situation. So then now this black kid is failing that test when he's just as gifted and educated as his white counterpart, but because it's different vernacular and asked in a way that they couldn't understand it, now it comes up as if they aren't, and they don't get the opportunity to get the higher level of education. If we want to have the conversation about moving into the private school space, then we need to talk about how we fund the private school space. That's also the other conversation. I don't have a problem getting a private school education if you can afford it, but we move right back into the space of resources. Most of these families can't afford a private school education, and so since they can't, they deserve just as much as an opportunity to get a quality education in a public school program as they would, or something close, maybe not 100% the same, but something close or comparable in a public school situation.
Sure. And, just to kind of focus in on just one of the things you said, in terms of one of the examples of systemic racism in schools was the fact that young black boys are suspended more than anybody else. That may be true, but then to say the reason that black kids are suspended more is because of racism, like that may not be true, right? And that may be saying it's not because of the behavior of the child, it's because of racism. So you're still kind of giving up the responsibility for why the idea, like, black kids are more suspended even in schools where the majority of the teachers are black, right? Where there are schools in New York City, for example, where you have a very small amount of white kids, right? White teachers. Most of the staff are black, what we call black and brown people, and but most of the kids, most of the kids being suspended are still black kids. Most of the kids that are still graduating at the slowest rate are still black kids, even when most of the teachers are black and the principal is black, even in those scenarios. And those are the same numbers that you're kind of jumbling in to say, black kids are being.
That's not true. That last statement you made is not true. I'm not jumbling them in.
Well, what I'm saying is when we look at like statistics, for example, when we look at statistics for the number of kids in schools that the number of kids that don't graduate, or the number of kids that are suspended, like they look at numbers for the whole city, and so they pile those numbers together. So there are schools, you don't know whether these schools are like who the teachers are, but we're just saying it's racism. It's like y'all can tell me if I'm wrong, and I'll tell you what I've known to be the definition of systemic racism, and why I think it's kind of like really a faulty idea, and maybe you can tell me what your definition is, and we can talk about it. But what I understand systemic racism to be, right, is that if you go into a school, if you go into any school and just look at the results, the outcome, or let's just say graduation rate, right? If black kids are at the bottom, if their graduation rates are the lowest, that's systemic racism. It doesn't ask why that happens. It doesn't ask who the teachers are. It doesn't ask who the principal of the school is. It doesn't ask whether that school is in a black city run by a black mayor. It just says, as long as the outcome, they just look at the outcome. And as long as, like, for example, if I coach soccer and there are two black kids that I coach, but they are like the worst kids. Like, seriously, they're the worst soccer players ever, right? I'm a soccer coach, and these are the worst soccer players ever. And in terms of playing time, they're going to get the least playing time because they're not that good. When someone comes in and looks at just the outcome of playing time on my team, all they need to see is that those black kids have the lowest playing time, and in their mind that's systemic racism. Like, that's a result of me being racist. It doesn't ask what the
Are you
skills of the kids
are
are.
you
They
asking,
only look at the
sir?
results.
Yeah, I
Sir,
want to
are you
respond. Go ahead, Blue, and
hold
then I'm
on?
gonna get it. Yeah, I'm
Are
gonna
you
get it, bro.
are
Yes,
you
yeah, good
asking that,
conversation,
or are you
King.
making a statement?
No, I'm kind of making the statement of what systemic racism is. What I'm saying is systemic
I'm finna
racism
get this. Yeah,
only
Okay, cool.
looks at
No,
outcomes. For,
cool, cool,
for you
cool.
to
No,
label
I got
something
you.
systemic
yeah,
racism,
yeah. I
you just
got you.
look at the outcome. It doesn't matter how it turned
There,
out that way. As long as you look at the outcome and it's not to the advantage of certain people, then it's systemic
yeah.
racism.
So let me ask you to do this. I need you to deal with me when we have these conversations, and I can't speak for what other people do. Notice how you basically created a straw man with the conversation, because what you went to was only dealing with the suspension situation and not dealing with my first conversation, which you agreed with, about how the schools are funded. So now let's use your soccer analogy, right? When we deal with the soccer analogy that you made, well, why was that kid uh, a bad soccer player? Because nobody taught him to be a good soccer player. Why are black kids, now if you want to say black kids, more misbehaved in school, right? Because of what's going on in their community. And then therefore, yes, we should have specialized schools in certain communities that are not just simply going to destroy the kid, throw him away, or prep him, as Blue talks about the school to prison pipeline, which basically that's all you're doing when you get put in ISS, in school suspension, right? The alternative to being in class is to now suspend you or isolate you rather than teach you proper behavioral techniques and proper behavioral tactics of how to interact at school. That's what needs to happen in many of these schools. But because the funding isn't there, because the compensation isn't there, now we can't do it. And why isn't the funding there? That's the systemic racism conversation. So that's what I'm saying. You can't just isolate one part of the conversation and then say, oh, we're only going to stay there, which is what you did. No, we have to look at it as a whole. And that's why I'm saying it doesn't remove responsibility. It thus by gives direction for the responsibility. Please understand that that's the argument. The argument is not that I disagree that people rest and live in the space of, oh, it's because of systemic racism, and so there's nothing we can do about it. I understand that that's what people do. But to act as though that it doesn't happen also removes the direction of where the responsibility needs to go. And I'm going to live in that space, right? The direction is not just good enough to say we need to fix the community. We have to live in a space of saying how we fix the community.
Sure, but let me just, like, if we could just say on the soccer one, right? Just on the analogy, just for clarity, right? Like, in the case of the black kids not getting playtime, right? You said we have to look at why they're not good at soccer, and possibly the systemic racism would be the racism part of it would be found in the reasons why they're not good at soccer. But what I'm telling you is that me, as the coach who didn't play them, I'm the one being blamed for racism,
And I
right?
agree with you.
And what I'm
And I
saying is,
agree with you in that analogy. That's why
but
I'm
all
telling
I'm
you, you have to look deeper into what I'm saying. I don't want to go in circles. We can't go in circles, right?
I'm not
When
trying to,
I
I'm not
when
trying to go in
but
circles.
I agree. Look, I agree with you in that space, and that's why my argument wasn't be mad at the teacher, right?
Hold on, man.
Even though it is the
He's
teachers,
completely wrong, though, bro.
I
There is
agree,
no
Blue, but
studies
I'm
where
trying
they
to
just go and
move
don't
us
look at
away from it. I
the
agree with
teacher
you, but
and
I'm
the
trying to move
situation,
from
the
it.
environment. Come on, bro. Like
Okay,
dog, that's totally wrong.
yeah, hold
No,
on one second.
what I'm
Hold on
telling
one
you is
second to the panel.
that is
1 second to the panel before you guys go any further. Really want to continue this conversation, but I do want to share something. I want to play a video real quick, and then I want you guys to continue this conversation. All right. So just hold on, and then Blue, you can pick it up right after the video ends, and then you brothers can go back into the exchange. But I just want to play this one video. So let me share my screen. All right, here we go. And
Among the many things the pandemic has exposed have been the deep social and racial inequities that run throughout the U.S. Add to that the killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and too many others, and the calls to address systemic racism have grown just louder and louder. So what better place to learn those lessons than in school? Christina Quinn has more.
Back in June, when the Black Lives Matter protests first broke out in cities across the country, something happened. They kept going, radiating throughout the suburbs, hopping oceans, and crossing borders. There was an undeniable momentum, one that teacher Joanna Chacon and her colleagues wanted to seize.
This summer has opened up spaces in which teachers have begun to speak more openly and honestly about race in our school systems.
Chacon is an English teacher at Newton South High School and was inspired by the work of Dr. Bettina Love, a pioneer of abolitionist teaching, a form of instruction rooted in combating systemic oppression and racism. So Chacon and her colleagues formed a book club to discuss anti-racist teaching. That quickly evolved into an online conference.
Within days, we had hundreds of teachers from 7 states. Now we're in all 50 states and we're in 24 countries.
Almost 6,000 teachers and counting are attending the National Educator Anti-Racism Conference. Bettina Love and other education experts will provide training on how to create an anti-racist school and curriculum in every subject.
Anti-racism means that I'm teaching lessons that go in depth about communities of color and doesn't just teach about the oppression those communities face.
Lessons that Amani Fonfield, a rising senior at Newton South, says everyone should learn. In early June, she staged a die-in in front of Newton City Hall during a Black Lives Matter protest. She says conversations about race happen at her school, but not with everybody.
And it gets frustrating when I'm the only voice, the only Black voice that has to represent a whole culture. And it's intimidating, and I don't think I should have to.
Fonfield will be leading a students and anti-racism discussion this weekend. She's hopeful this conference is the first step towards lasting change.
I don't expect us to have the conversations around race normalized immediately. I do think that teachers will really reflect on what they've done in the past or what they haven't done.
That level of introspection is why Kate Fussner is attending the conference. 3 years ago, she changed her 9th grade English curriculum at Fenway High School in Boston to better reflect the largely Black and Latinx student population.
My curriculum focuses on giving students choice to find what they love to read and to find their voices, their inspiration in living writers, in particular writers of color and queer writers.
Fussner says this conference is an opportunity for white educators, who make up the vast majority of public school teachers in this country, to build on the momentum that teachers of color have built over generations.
We need to be there to push each other and to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because ultimately I think that's what's going to move us forward.
When the conference wraps up next week, the hope is that teachers attending will contribute lesson plans to a database accessible to any teacher who sees racial justice as part of their calling. Christina Quinn, WGBH News.
That conference, of course, is virtual this year, but
he's in this video.
All right.
to be free again. It starts this weekend. And you can find more info.
All right. So, is there American Dream? He's back. Okay. So, I mean, so we clearly see that there are evidence, programs of movements in regards to systemic racism in education. So I hear what Blue is saying. I hear what Adon is saying, as well as American Dream. So Blue, and one thing I did notice about this video and about this particular movement is that we still see there is a large disparity of white educators versus Black educators in this country.
Right.
It is a major issue that moving forward in this conversation really needs to be understood, and how they really connect to us, because I think it goes back to what Yami was saying. We really have to look at the cultural ramifications of it, right? are the educators who are in the classrooms who are teaching children of children of color. Is there a cultural divide that exists, right? That sort of is perpetuated this sort of systemic disparity when it comes to education in our communities. So, Blue, you had the floor when I played this video, so I want you to pick back up on your point and then move forward.
Yeah, no, I think the video though hit on it. Like I said, like when a lot of these studies is done, it's not just blame the teacher or just well the reason, the studies go a lot deeper than that. They go into the environment, they go into what kids are even eating before they even stepped into the class. So it's a lot of different things going on, bro, and it's a lot of things that play into it. Uh, uh, One of the major problems, like you said, not having enough teachers that necessarily look like us, and so a lot of the teachers is quick to jump is a little bit quicker with the discipline to jump to extreme discipline more so than other teachers, and so we see. Well, another question I would like to ask: where is the study at? The brother said that there was a study that showed that black kids at black schools still suffer at the same rate. You said that even with a black principal and black teachers,
No, what I said was
that it's the same results.
no. What I said is when they look at the data, when they look at the data that they only look at the data that says, and the data just shows them how many kids were suspended, and it breaks it down on racial grounds, right? But the data doesn't say whether or not, like when we hear that kids are more that black kids are more suspended, in a way we kind of take for granted that that means that they're being suspended by white teachers, right? And what I'm saying is that's not necessarily true, right? Because if you go to schools where even they're not breaking it down to which schools it's happening at, what the geography of the staff is. They're just saying it's just racism, right? And racism is
And
given as the reason for why black kids are suspended at the rate that they're suspended at. They just look at the results, and because black kids are at the bottom, it's racism. There's no other reason for it other than that. They're at the bottom,
well,
so it must be racism.
well, I think your problem with that is well, you said they don't consider demographics. They do. 9 times out of 10, when they're doing these studies, it's based on inner city kids. So you got a problem right there. Number three,
Yeah, but what I'm
nine
saying
times
is
out of nine times inner city kids.
but inner city kids for the most part have teachers of color, not white teachers.
No, they don't. Bro, what school did you go to in the inner city where you had black teachers? I never even had one black male teacher, and the principal was white.
I mean, you can't talk about statistics and then just come to your own anecdotal, right? But across the city, like if I live in New York City, I know children that
Uh-huh.
go to public schools in New York City. I've been to parent teacher conferences. Most of the parents I confront are not just white teachers. There are most of them are teachers of color, black teachers, Hispanics, um, um, from the
But
Philippines, all over
hey,
the
hold
place.
on. Okay, and that's a handful of schools then. By and far, the numbers show that there are
This is
far more
crazy.
white teachers than any other teacher of color. Like I'm sorry. I love that you have personal experience in certain spaces, but that does not speak to the whole. That does not speak to the majority. And even when you start to look at what you're saying, if you break it down and you're saying, oh, well, it doesn't take into account where this was an all-black school with mostly teachers. Once again, that's a very small number,
Right.
especially when we're looking at the country as a whole. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about black people around this country as a whole. We cannot
Sure.
take our individual experiences and then blanket that or try to reshape that. And then, but finally though, this is the point. Once again, brother, I'm not saying that systemic is the issue where we need to just lay on, but to act as though that it doesn't play a huge role in how our children are affected in school. Like, I'm sorry, that's to me, it's
well, the reason I'm saying that is because of what systemic racism is. Systemic racism is just the outcome. Like, for you to say that the outcome plays a role in what happens,
explain.
like, that's confusing to me, because
explain. Explain what you mean when you say
systemic racism. I'm just trying to explain what systemic racism is, right? Systemic racism kind of is the reason, this whole idea about equity and inequity, right? It all goes in hand with systemic racism. Systemic racism is what it says it's responsible for inequities in our society, right? And what are those inequities? The inequities are just, people just look at statistics. They just go and look at numbers and they say, look at the graduation rates, right? And those graduation rates are disproportionate, if you will. There are too many Black kids being suspended. There are not enough Black kids graduating. So they're just looking at the results, the outcome, right? At the end of the year. Let me just finish. They look at the outcome, and those outcomes are not there. That's what they call inequities, are just the results, right? And so now to fix that, they need equity. And equity means it's the same thing. They're going to make the results equal, right? That's what equity means. Like, there was a time when with the civil rights movement, for example, like, and I think, I've been listening in and I've been hearing conversations about, whether we want equality or whether we want equity, right? And in my head, the difference was during the civil rights movement, we were all trying to get equal opportunity, right? We all wanted a chance. For example, if we're going to keep it on the soccer analogy, we all wanted a chance to try out for that team, right? We all wanted an equal chance to try out for the team. And that's what equality means. We want equal opportunity, right? Equity, though, is something different. Let me just say how equity is different. Equity means that I want to be a part of the team. The outcome has to have a certain number of Black people on there. The results have to be equitable, right? So equity is about just looking at the results, and the results have to be a certain way. And that's what the difference is with equality and equity. And that's why I'm having a problem with the idea of systemic racism, and you saying the reason things don't happen is because of systemic racism, is because it's not clicking in my head, because systemic racism is just the outcome. So you're blaming the outcome for what's happening. And that's weird in my head.
I gotta do this, Blue. Let me get this. All right, first off, once again, stop straw man. Okay, I never said that, we rest on the systemic racism argument. But since you want to take this to equality versus equity, now I get to put on my domo cap, because I wish that he would have argued this a little bit better last night. The problem is yes, we have fought and actually got equality in a lot of spaces, but just like you spoke about, because we don't have enough Black people on the soccer team, we don't have enough Black people in the positions that are actually making a difference, so we don't have equity. Therefore, systemic racism still gets to continue to work. That is the problem. To act as though that systemic racism doesn't play a part in this conversation is asinine, because when we move into the space of understanding how the things are funded, how they are actually put into place. So for instance, once again, we just heard the video where they're talking about now changing curriculum, but you can't change curriculum if your school does not have the funding. So even if you have a school of majority Black teachers and the curriculum is not up to par and you're not able to change it due to either financial setbacks or due to the fact that you just don't have the ability to, because of whatever the principal's doing or whatever the situation is, even if you want to say, okay, now we have equity because we have more people, we don't have the proper equity because we don't have more funding. And I'm not saying that it only rests on funding either, because you now continue to make straw mans. So now we're going to move into the space where you have to look at this as a collective and not just as a one size fits all or one piece, right? As a collective, we don't have the equity necessary to say that systemic racism doesn't exist, because it does. We don't have the equity necessary to say that systemic or systematic, however you want to word it, doesn't play a role, because we have not been able to overcome it. We have not been able to remove it from the equation, because we don't have enough equity. I'm glad that you went there to equality and equity, because we do not have enough equity. We are not able to fight at the rate and at the level that we need to. Does that mean then that we just say, oh, systemic racism is the only issue and it's the only thing that exists? No. All I'm telling you is it's impossible to say that it's not a factor. And that's what I see and hear you doing. To say that it's not a factor is not fair. To say that it is not something that we have to take into account when we're talking about fixing our community is not accurate at all. And it's now it's moving into the, allow me to finish, bro. I'll let you go. And now we're moving into the hyperbolic space of saying, oh, well, just because many people rest on the notion of systemic racism, we have to change that. We have to change that. We can't even talk about systemic racism, because if we do, then everybody will just rest on the space of systemic racism. That is not true at all.
And this is the thing too, is that when you are trying to maneuver it into, it's just about whether we have enough black teachers, or it's just about too many suspensions, or it's just, bro, there are multiple factors that are going on. In some places, it's about not having enough teachers. In some places, and funding. In most places, it's about not having enough funding. So it ain't necessarily the suspension. It depends, bro, on where you at and what you're talking about. The one thing that we can see is capital comes down to, at the end of it, being the end all be all. The fact that they drained our areas of capital in order to skyrocket other areas in capital is systemic racism. Like I don't get it. It ain't just education, bro. It's how everything forms. So you can't just go, well, let's just talk about education. No, because education is also formed. Is also a problem because of the capital that's in that community. Why is there no capital in the community? Because they built the goddamn freeway on top of your damn shit. Because you know the you know, when you want to go to the New York Giants game or the Knicks game, they doing that right on top of a thriving black neighborhood. That they see, what you fail to realize is a lot of the neighborhoods that they were labeling as slums, they only labeled these communities slums because black and Latino people lived in. They weren't slums, bro. They weren't slums. All of this plays a factor.
You know, brother.
Sure, and I think the major problem that I'm having.
Hold on, real quick, brother. I just wanted to say something really quick. Earlier when we were talking about Larry Hoover, and you asked for, I think it was Yara, to more educate you on it because you weren't familiar with it. I don't know if you were born here or if you moved here, you know, so you weren't fully aware of, you know, Larry Hoover, and you asked Yara to more educate you on it. I think, and you know, I'm not trying to like take it there, but if you're not properly educated on this subject because perhaps you weren't born here, or, you know, for whatever reason, that it doesn't hurt. And I ask you respectfully that you may listen to the people who have lived through this and who are very much so familiar with it. What I am hearing from you is what a lot of Black Americans who are born here, a issue that we have with people, Black people who were not born here, and they come in and they try and tell us about issues that we are very much so familiar with, and you may not be aware of the intricacies of it, you know. So I'm not telling you not to have your own personal view of it, but I think you should very much so digest what is being told to you. And
you know, I think that's kind of like Yeah, I think I think to say that is to kind of make believe that Black Americans who were born in America don't believe or have the same ideas that I do. That the only reason I'm feeling this way is because I wasn't born here. But I think that some of the most some of the people that are more prominent in their fight against this idea of systemic racism are people who are Black Americans. Some of the people who have written books on the issue against the issue are Black Americans. So I think it's a little unfair to say that the reason I'm holding these views is because I'm not an American, and I think it kind of discredits those people, those Black people who are Americans, who have those feelings, and I don't see why I can't hold those ideas for the same reason that they do, just based on just evaluating ideas. Um, but yeah, again, but let me just say, you may be right that I'm having a misunderstanding, but I don't think it's because I wasn't born in America. Because again, a lot of people have misunderstandings about this concept. But the reason that I think I'm having the misunderstanding is because I'm trying to wrap my mind around what y'all are saying. I'm trying to put it in terms of how I define systemic racism. In my definition of systemic racism is that it's just unequal outcomes based on race. Right, you're only looking at outcomes, nothing else. But I don't know, when you guys speak about systemic racism, and saying systemic racism is the reason things are happening. In my head, it doesn't make sense based on the definition of systemic racism that I have in my head, right? So my question to you is, if you could please define for me what you think systemic racism is. I'd prefer that you not give me examples of it. I would prefer like a definition for systemic racism.
Peace, everyone.
Peace, Melanated Goddess. Welcome to
Peace,
the
man.
panel, sis.
Thank
Peace.
you, thank you. This is a really interesting conversation, and when I first started listening, I can't really see anyone's name, but the gentleman with the fitted hat on and the flag. No disrespect. I don't know your name, but I was actually agreeing with a lot of his comments, specifically around how data is interpreted pertaining to the school system. And but I will say that I guess I'm kind of in the middle, that this,
Right.
although I recognize that the data is interpreted a particular way to make it seem like white people are suspending black children more, or white people are not educating black kids, and it could appear to be that way. When I think of systemic racism, it is not like to look at the school system and the outcomes of the school system, but it is the relationship between various systems that has a
Facts.
collective outcome, right? So when you look at the medical system and how that impacts the education system, when you look at the criminal justice system and how that
Facts.
impacts the criminal justice system, when you look at um, community violence and policing, and how children who experience trauma, how they perform. So if there are
Facts.
systems in place that create trauma and that perpetuate trauma, then those systems, when they interact with each other, you have this outcome, whether it's test scores, graduation rates, incarceration rates, abortion rates, all of these other things, right? So it's not looking at one system and one quote unquote racism and one outcome, but it's the relationship between all of the different systems. And if you look at those systems, then you can't say that there's no racism, right? If you look at, like, in your community, if police allow more violence or allow more drugs in your community, they could almost bet their whole paycheck on what the outcome would be in 6 months, a year, 10, 15 years, right? So how is that not a racist event? It is, right? But when you say that, like, I think he gave the example of suspension rates. You know, there's not, like, in my school, I would say I have like 5 non-black staff in an entire high school. right? My whole staff is Black.
And
Receptionist, attendance count.
Oh yeah, I know where it is. Never mind. You don't gotta say it.
Right.
Right.
Well, no, and I was raised in New York City. The first time I had a white teacher was in high school. I never had an elementary, daycare, middle school. I mean, everyone from the janitor to the principal was Black in my school.
Now, have y'all gone to school in Texas or in California or in Washington State?
So I think what my point is that my school reflected my community. So when I lived in Miami, Florida, right, and I was living around a bunch of Cubans, then there was lots of Spanish-speaking people working in the school, right? So in Texas, probably in an environment where there's more Black people, then you'll have more Black staff, right? And then when the community becomes mixed, then your staff is mixed. And when the community becomes all white, you're not going to have Black people working in an all-white school with all of the kids Black and everyone who lives in that environment is Black, right?
I'm sorry. I know in California that's largely by and large what you see. I'm just speaking to the numbers of it. I grew up in these schools. Even now, I have nephews or cousins that go to these schools, and many of these schools in the inner city.
What's the population of Black people in California? It's mostly Black. The whole California is Black.
No, but you're talking about specifically in certain neighborhoods.
I'm saying, okay, so in those neighborhoods,
so in those neighborhoods, the
they're
majority
90%
of those
Black.
teachers in those neighborhoods, yes, you do have neighborhoods that will be 60, 70, 80%, 90% Black, especially in some of these neighborhoods. Yes, it's either Black or Hispanic, right? There in certain parts of Richmond, in California, you got Black and Hispanics, and even you will
ain't
see
that many Hispanic teachers.
Like you don't even get that.
So okay, so 1 out of 50. You telling me that in the majority? So like when you think about the bigger cities, because we don't populate the whole of California. We don't populate. I'm talking about the cities where we are heavily dense. You're saying that those Black people all had white.
Nah, that's not what I'm saying at all. And I think
let me not make it because I said all. The majority of Black people in the cities that we like concentrate in, right? You're saying that those Black people still have the majority white staff.
In a lot of those areas, especially on the West Coast, yes. And I'm just speaking from what I've seen, and I understand.
And I guess I'm speaking from the East Coast,
right?
Because
and that's what I'm saying. That's what I was asking, right?
When I lived in Clayton County, Georgia, my son's school was all Black.
Too. Right,
his school was all Black in the Atlanta area, and I'm sure if I would have lived in Marietta, it might have been a whole lot different.
I was gonna say, but you still got a whole bunch of Black people in Marietta, though.
But it's not a whole bunch. It's because when you go there, it don't. When I went there, I didn't see like all. It was like all Black.
It's a lot of Black people in Marietta, especially Marietta and Smyrna, especially now. Like especially these last 10 years, it's really changed because more and more white people are moving Sandy Springs, Alpharetta, Powder Springs, that area, right? So I mean, you're
saying more people are moving, and once it's like, I'm almost certain, right? Because that area, you do have more people who at least have a 4-year degree, right? So you will start to have more Black teachers than you do now. That's just how it goes.
All I'm saying is this, but even I think we're moving beyond the point, right? Because the point was never like, it's just. Or the only point was never just, it's only white teachers suspending Black children. That's the argument that he created, right? And that's why I said it was a straw man, because it also is a specific issue of funding or a specific issue of curriculum. So for instance, if you're dealing with, like how you said, so now this is why systemic racism becomes an issue, because systemic racism is an institutional problem that permeates discrimination in multiple organizations. It's not just in the school system. It's not just in the medical system. It's not just in the legal system. It's all of the systems that have discriminatory practices based upon race, and that permeates and plays a role in every aspect of, especially what we would consider inner city, but in all Black people's lives,
right?
In certain ways, shape, or form. And so when we talk about systemic racism, it's not just white teachers are suspending Black kids more. It's the fact that there is no focus on saying these kids come from a place of trauma, so we have to teach them different. That's the systemic issue that we're talking about.
That's what I'm saying about I feel it's in the middle. The because you're considering the other systemic factors that are in play that impact education. So because I come from the lens that what you see in the classroom is a byproduct of like everything else impacts that child, whether or not their parents have prenatal care, whether or not their parents graduated high school, whether or not their parents are even able to read, whether or not they see their parents, if their parents are employed, if they're not, if there's an extended family member, if they are homeless or couch surfing from one family member. Like it's just so many other factors that it's not about. There are 50% of the Black kids can read and 50% of the white kids can read. Like it's not. It's a little bit more than parents' reading levels. You know.
Yeah, if I could just add, just the idea of that, I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around the idea of systemic racism and being even the way it was described as a bunch of different systems coming together. It sounds in my head, it looks like a machine. It's like this machine that where all the systems are in place, fine-tuned just perfectly so that this Black kid gets suspended. And I'm like, and again, for me, it just highlights the idea of no personal responsibility. And I think in my head, it kind of only strengthens that because again, systemic racism is this machine that we can't really fight against. We have no control over.
No
it just sounds so kind
Why do you
of. I
keep
mean, the way
saying
it was
that?
defined, that's what it was kind of defined
No, it
as.
isn't.
Like,
No one is saying that. And I'm trying to
I
understand
was
why you
never
keep
taking
saying
away
that.
personal
And
responsibility. I think
either. My whole argument was it gives us a focus for where our personal responsibility should be. That's my whole argument. So I'm trying to understand, why do you keep saying something that no one on the panel is saying, brother? Like that's where it starts to
because
get.
like if the conversation was on something like resilience, right? Then we could give loads and loads and loads of examples of Black people who have been resilient, who are resilient. We can talk about different factors that impact resilience, and all resilience is despite a certain level of characteristics in place, a certain level of life events or situations, a person is able to overcome those, right? And so resilience is not something unheard of. In all of these low performing schools, there are students who are valedictorian, right? A level of resilience, despite their community violence, despite whatever, despite being in foster care, despite blah, 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 all this whole list of stuff, right? They have overcome and they are exceptional, right? That's personal accountability. That's you can measure the top performing students from low performing students, all of that stuff. Like no one is erasing personal responsibility, that having a certain awareness of something going on and being able to overcome it. Some people is conscious, some people is unconscious. Like I think that there's a lot of ways to look at it. So saying that there's a systemic system in place does not absorb anyone of being able to circumvent that system that exists. So I just felt that that needed to be said, because it's, I maybe, you take for granted that.
You said it 3 times. It's like at this point, like I'm starting to get frustrated, because my entire argument was never that we rest on systemic racism and remove responsibility. But you're going to have a problem if you continue to say that systemic racism doesn't exist and that it doesn't play a role. For instance, how we define maladaptive behavior from a psychological perspective. And then that becomes how you then punish the student, right? So let's get into that, since we want to live in the school system for a second. How we define how a student should be suspended has to change because of where certain children come from. Yes. Am I saying, that we're not holding them accountable? No. What I am saying is, if they are taught in their neighborhood that the only way to survive at times is to beat the brakes off of another kid, then they're going to do that in school. And they need to be taught that they can't do that. And you don't teach them that by kicking them out of the school. And that's where systemic racism comes in.
I'm gonna be honest, bro. I feel like Nelly Fuller right now. I think we being
I know. I
counterproductive.
was trying not to go into.
I'm just gonna ask you right now, bro. Are you a victim of white supremacy? Because if not, bro, this is the code of conduct
not to go
for
to
those who are victims of white supremacy, sir.
Because you know me and Blue.
I'm just gonna be honest with you.
Me and Blue got a debate coming
up. I have a question. And I wanted to see. I want to see how the brothers would even see how to handle this, right? Or how to view this particular situation. Because when we're talking about like suspension, right? Do you think that a student should be suspended if their parent comes to the school and begin to fight other students and the student fights along with their parent? And in this particular example, it was parents, both mother and father, came to the school to fight students, and the student fought along with their parents. Should the student be suspended? What do you all think?
I think it depends on the situation.
It should not be suspended.
I'm gonna tell you, it depends on the situation.
That's clear.
Hold on. That happened to me. Hold on. This happened to me, so I can speak directly to this. All right. Some kids had a problem with one of my best friends. They had a problem with it, and they pulled up with their mom to jump him, and I didn't know. Right. I get told, yo, they jumping your partner. I come back upstairs. The mom and the two boys is jumping my partner. I beat the brakes off of all three of them. All three of their asses need to be gone because they showed up to do that, right? But now you're talking about a student that actually had to get involved to fight to protect his parents. I don't know the situation. I think now we talking about situational dependency. Like I'm not going to tell any kid. I'm not going to tell any kid to sit there and watch their parents get beat up.
So part of the reason why I use that as an example is because that the family is a system.
The problem is those are less than 5% of the cases of suspension.
No, I understand.
Most cases
what I'm
that
saying
black
is that
kids is being
that's an
suspended
example of how systems, Brother Blue. When I'm saying that's an example of how systems interact with one another. Right.
Oh yeah.
So, but when administration at the school is looking at it, they are looking at the students' behavior in isolation. Right. And that is the breakdown, because if you continue to intervene in that manner, you will never address the real issue as to why parents think I'm gonna fight kids, why kids are fighting adults in the building, why, it's like you're never going to, our school environments are going to continue to be like that if we intervene in isolation. That's why I use that as an example, because the intervention is supposed to address that family dynamic. It's supposed to address community violence. It's supposed to address education. It's supposed to address the safety of everyone else in the building, right?
But it doesn't. Instead, it promotes isolation. And then
because the kids is removed from the environment. They're removed for 5 days or 10 days or whatever.
And
now
he's not taught.
You never
how to
know
adapt.
when somebody's parent gonna pop off on him.
Right. And that, but then that child is never taught from that perspective. He's not taught then how to properly adapt. Right. And I'm not saying he has to become the prototypical, sellout or whatever you want to call him, because I can hear the sellout and coon calls as we conversating about this. Right. But the problem is that child is then never taught how to properly adapt and how to use other resources to overcome a problem. Instead, I fought, you suspended me, now you hating on me. You just don't want me to be great. Didn't you see what that person was doing to me? You just didn't want me to be great. Right? That we got to remove both of those situations. We have to do better and start to deal with each situation.
Can I ask you a question?
Who, me?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, King.
You said that child wasn't taught how to behave, and the child wasn't taught that type of stuff. Like what class? Like that child had other classmates as well, like who don't behave like that child does. Like what class did those kids have? What were they taught differently in what classes than
Amazing.
this child?
Yeah, amazing. It's not a class situation. And that's why I told you we have to now deal
So
with
it's a home
children.
situation. So it's not about school. It's about
Right.
what's happening at
Which
home.
is the system, bro.
The
Stop and
system.
listen. Yes, watch
The
this.
system.
No, home
Listen.
is a system. It's a system. There are multiple systems. Your family life is a system, and that system into like church. Church is a system. Family interacts with church. Family interacts with the medical system. Family interacts with the court system. Your family members are a system.
Sure, but where does systemic racism come into all of that?
Wow.
So within each system, it looks differently, right? The medical system, when you want to talk about why more Black women die in childbirth than non-Black women, right? You have to look at that. Black women have more hysterectomies or given more hysterectomies than
You think that's
non-Black.
because of racism?
Why would you need my uterus versus a white uterus? I'm trying to understand.
Hold on. Like you say the reason that Black people have certain medical conditions more than white people is because of racism?
Because of okay, so there are more Black people who live in food deserts than non-Black people, right? So non-Black people have access to better foods, which cause, like, if you're not seeing how systems are related, you keep trying to put them in individuals, and I'm saying,
I'm not saying I don't see how systems are related. I'm just not seeing where
let's go slower.
systemic
How do you get a health
racism.
condition? How do you get a health condition?
What are
How do
you
you get a health
saying?
condition?
Hold on, what are you saying then? Because I keep hearing you lightweight come in and sneakily agree with everything and then turn around and argue it. If you're not saying that what she's saying is incorrect, then how do you not understand?
Because the reason, like,
how do you get health conditions? How do you get health conditions? Right? If I don't know you, right?
It depends. If you're a smoker, if you eat meat, if you drink alcohol, if you don't exercise, there's a bunch of different reasons why it could be hereditary. There's a bunch of reasons why you have health situations.
You eliminated diet and that's a huge one that causes health conditions.
Sure.
I don't know why you eliminated diet, because that specifically was my point about, I brought up food deserts, right? So you went all over and talking about drinking alcohol, right? Okay. But if other people have access to, healthier foods, is that not a remedy at times to combat certain environmental things, right? There are lots of factors that contribute to poor health, right? And what I'm saying is that if we're 13%, we do not have the
How
control.
about we're on
right?
top of pollution from
Yeah, we
freeway?
don't control our environmental factors. We absolutely don't. Why are you acting as if like that part is
I'm not sure what you mean when you say we don't control. Like,
we do not control. Okay, so
they want to put.
You don't control where you live.
No, I did not.
Control what
No. As
supermarket you shop at.
a child, I did not control where I live. I did
Your
not
parents
control.
did. As a child, no, but your parents did.
Hold on. You have to listen.
As a child, you're not supposed to.
You have to listen in entirety in order to understand my point. My parents did not control the cost of the environment, right? So if you want to keep certain group out, all you do is control the cost. If I want to keep a certain element out of my store, I control the cost of my merchandise. It is that freaking simple, right? So therefore, communities are created based off of that to keep certain element out and keep a certain element in. Punto final, right? That's we not creating that. My parents didn't have control. Their parents didn't have control over that, right? And our parents, from the time that they were brought here, someone created those lines, created those boundaries, created those limitations, right? That's fact. That's not my emotion creating that, right? And therefore, so from that starting point, You can only move from within that boundary. Obviously, my generation, I'm doing better than 3 generations ago, but I still don't have the choice to go live in a freaking $1 million house right now. I don't.
Real quick, sister. Have we established if the brother acknowledges such things as white supremacy? Brother?
Oh, was that a question? I thought you were asking her.
I'm sorry. Well, let me ask you formally. Do you acknowledge that there's a such thing as white supremacy?
I don't know what you mean by that. Like, how do you define white supremacy?
Okay, all right. Let me break it. Let me break it down at this point. Have white people or people that we call white people pretty much established a pretty much global system, whereas they control all or most of the resources
Around the globe?
Yeah.
Sir?
White people control most of the resources around the globe?
Yes, sir.
No, I don't know if that's true.
All right.
I don't know if that's true. The globe is very big.
Okay.
I just don't know if that's true. And to say, like, would that mean that because white people control all of the resources around the globe, does that mean that they're doing it in together, that they have this big plan for what, what I mean? Like all of them are
Oh
in
my
it
God.
together,
How
or
would they do? Oh, wait.
Wait.
Can you trade oil outside of using the US dollar, sir?
can you trade oil outside of using? I'm not sure. Probably not. I'm not sure. I don't know the details of
And
that
if
stuff
you do,
that much.
what happens? What happens if you do?
Go outside. I'm not, like, again. I don't know if what you're saying is true. So I'm not sure. I don't know.
Can you say
Okay,
where do
that's
you
as far as
think
we can go with it, bro. You gotta
where,
go. You
can you give me a
it's
country
a waste
or
of time.
a region where a person of European descent does not have control? Can you where do you think that is?
Where a person of European descent does not have control.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably say China. I think the Chinese
I
government.
knew
I
he
don't
was
think
gonna
the
say
Chinese
China.
government is run by Europeans. I
We
think
built
Oh,
there are
really?
certain African
we
countries.
built
I
Daggers.
think even in South
we
Yeah.
built
Africa right now, I think they kicked out a
Oh,
bunch of white folks. I don't think white
What?
people are still in
They
control
just
there. I don't
gave
think.
white people reparations in South Africa and gave them back their
you
own.
you you
So,
jumped out.
I
but
You
that's
see
jumped
not
out of
what
more
the
a
two
while
windows
ago.
now,
I
and
see
and
what the
No,
and
all
they
I'm
just
saying
took
is,
the world back.
to say the
And
idea that most of
oh,
the resources are owned by.
wait, because you lied twice. China is controlled. They got their central bank is when it is European centered, bro. The money is involved with it, and China has to buy oil with the U.S. dollar. Man, you just died on that, bro. I don't even know you have no idea what you talking about right now. And you got
Well,
to be the dude with the American flag on his face. You got to be him.
well, hold on one second, man. I don't want to get into calling people liars, but I feel you, Blue, what you're saying. Y'all have a disagreement. Let's keep it at that level of rhetoric. This is brothers new to this panel, so I want the brother to feel welcome and comfortable coming back because this is for good conversation. We can have difference of opinion, but we definitely want to get into
Right.
it.
My fault,
So,
bro.
but I appreciate your
Definitely
comments, Blue. I appreciate your comments. But I'm getting ready to shut this down um in about 7 minutes or so. But I want everybody to get their here's A9 back. I want everybody to get their last and final comments on the subject. I
Hey,
do want to have a second part of the discussion.
Can you extend 5 more minutes?
Absolutely. You got it. You got it.
I just want to ask him a question, and then we could do, I guess, closing thoughts. Brother American Dream, from your perspective, who was in control of the global resources? Like, as a globe, I mean, you do understand that there is a global economic, social, and political system that exists. That's the first question. And then, if you do understand that, do you believe that the Europeans are in control of that system? Yes or no?
No, I do believe that countries are, as they state, like those countries are independent, and I do believe that countries are sovereign countries. So no, I don't believe that there's this one world government idea where there's this one group of people that controls everything. And no, I don't necessarily. I don't believe that's happening. I think the resources on the globe is owned by the inhabitants of the globe, and I don't think there's any one person or one group that I don't believe in that idea. I don't find that idea to be true or useful.
And this is
I have a
problem.
question. What was the Berlin conference then? Do you, like what would you say that is?
I guess I would have to probably, off the top of my head, I would have to read up more on it to answer
So
that
the
question
Berlin
properly.
conference was a conference of European nations who divided up the continent of Africa. Was that not be an example of white people as a group, right, from various nations, right? Portuguese, Britain, Scotland, Ireland, who are them other people, y'all?
France.
France.
Sure, but
Yeah,
Africa,
thank
but
you.
Africa's not, but
Right.
Africa's
No,
not the
hold on,
whole
hold on.
globe.
I didn't listen. Don't go left. I asked you a question. Would that not be an example of white supremacy? White people being supreme over black people and dividing up, creating, forget if you're Yoruba and you're Igbo, guess what? All y'all motherfuckers is Nigerian right now, right? Like they did that. They did that. Is that not an example of white supremacy? Yes? No? What you think?
No, I think it's more of an example of people taking advantage of an economic situation.
Come on,
Do I think they
Who
did
was
it?
black?
You know what,
Do I
Who was
think they
black?
did
When I
it?
say white people,
Do I,
those were European
but y'all
nations,
gotta let me
right?
answer. If y'all gonna ask me a question, y'all should at least let me finish my
Yeah,
answer.
yeah. At
People.
least let him get his answer out and
All
then
right.
address him. I'm going to give you guys the floor because, I can extend a few more minutes, so I'm gonna let you guys go with it. But yeah, let him get his answer out. Melanie got us, and then Anonymous Hebrew.
Thanks. Yeah, stuff like that kind of throws me off and like throws my, but yeah, I just don't necessarily, never mind. I kind of lost my train of thought.
Go ahead now. Melanie Goddess, you got it.
Oh no, well, I was basically kind of I didn't mean to get you off a train of thought. I just wanted you to answer about, because you gave a general, you said those are people, and I specifically used that
Oh,
example,
right.
not for you to generalize it. I gave you an example of European people doing something to non-European people, right? So if there was another example where they were enslaving themselves, then I didn't use that for that, right? So or they were conquering themselves or other European nations. I specifically gave you an example where European people were conquering and enslaving non-European people, and what you did was you generalized it and said, I see them as people. Right, and
Taking
that
advantage of a situation, like and I think you kind of
that's
answered the
being
question.
disingenuous. I think
Right,
that
but I
was you
think
being disingenuous.
Sure, but I think you kind of answered the question yourself, because if you remember, these same Europeans at some point also invaded their neighbors who were also European and took over their land as well. And the reason they did it to them wasn't necessarily because of white supremacy. And I'm saying the reason they did it to their own neighbors and their fellow Europeans could possibly be the same reason why they did it in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily because of white
because those
supremacy.
people.
If I could just finish, it's not necessarily. It's not necessarily because of white supremacy. It's just because that's just how humans operate. They go into places and take over situations and to take advantage of economic things.
So would you say that the part where they took away their
Oh.
God, their language, their belief system, that part was white supremacy? Because when they conquered themselves, those people still had their language, those people still knew who they were, they still had their history. So would you say that that part was white supremacy? Because they're completely different, but I see you're trying to make them similar. So I'm asking you, would you say that that part was a supremacist mindset, to remove a person's religion, to remove a person's language, to remove their own identity? Would you say that part is
that
racism?
normal human behavior?
No, it's not, Blue. Excellent question.
when you invade someone and take over their land, is it normal to prevent them from worshiping the way they normally worship and preventing them from going to their places of worship?
No.
Sure, that happens.
No.
You know,
No,
I
it's
don't
not.
see where
No.
I don't see like where is it where actually that is a fact. Like if you
No,
invade
it's not.
someone,
No,
the
the
people you
Europeans who were
conquer aren't just
enslaved,
allowed.
Only amongst you. See, this is where
the
you're gonna die
Europeans
at.
who were
Only
enslaved
amongst
still had their
Europeans.
language, bro. That's you. You're not being honest. The Europeans who enslaved other Europeans still had their language. They still allowed them to worship their God. They still. That's why it's called pagan. They were doing their pagan stuff, and they allowed them to do it. Like you're literally not being honest right now, so you can say that black people want to be victims. Like that's not
Let me say
cool.
this,
Yeah,
brother.
and
You was just part of a conversation. The conversation title involved how black people react differently toward things within our community as opposed to when white people could commit those. And so that title alone differentiates or it damn, I'm trying to see how to damn say it. But now on the flip side is like you're totally throwing all of that to the side and saying there is no white supremacy or someone else go. I'm sorry.
You know, when the Christians invaded the Muslims, or when the Muslims invade Christians, it was either convert or die. So, you know, this idea of they could keep their religion and stuff, and it
Exactly.
only
Oh,
happened when people went into Africa. I don't understand where we're getting this from.
Bro, where did that come from?
man.
Where did that come?
just
That
died
comes
again.
just out of natural
You just
humanity. That's what
mentioned
people
no,
do.
no,
Does
wait.
If
No, it
if
does
I
not,
conquer
bro.
you,
It
you're
comes
not
Just
from
going to be
lied.
able to just go
improper.
Bro,
worship
that
your
comes from
God the
Europe.
same way.
Bro, you
Not if
just
I can do
mentioned
something about
Islam.
it.
Bro,
Okay,
you
yeah.
just mentioned
Let
Islam
me
and
yeah.
Christianity, bro, and both of those come from Europe. Try it fucking again, bro.
How does Islam come from Europe?
How it does it? Where's Turkey at?
Hey, you got to stop, Blue. Hey, everything
Where
can't
is
come from
Turkey?
Turkey, bro.
All roads lead back to
Everything
Constantinople,
can't
bro.
come from Turkey,
All
man.
roads
And where
go
do you
back
get
to
this
Turkey.
information that Islam started in Turkey?
No,
All
what he's
roads
saying
go
is
back.
this is what he's saying. So
Where,
you
where
don't
does
know
the
his
Star and
perspective.
Crescent? Hold on, I'm finna
Yeah,
cut it. Where does the Star and Crescent come from?
man.
Clown. You finna die. Where does the Star
Don't
and
call
Crescent
him
come
no
from?
clown, Blue. Stop.
Oh,
Yeah,
my fault, bro. My fault. I'm in
I
debate
just
mode. My
asked, where
fault,
does the
bro.
idea
It's not
that
personal.
Islam started
You
in
on the
Blue
Turkey
ready to
debate
come from?
channel, bro. It's not
yeah.
personal.
Blue ready to shoot me right now. That's misguided anger. Don't take that the wrong way, American Dream.
Because the Star and the Crescent, which when Islam when you get Islam birth, the Star and the Crescent actually comes from Turkey, bro. It doesn't actually come uh from the areas that they say. But even if you go outside, that landmass that it would still come from wouldn't be Africa anyway, bro. And it
So,
would be
so,
Eurasia.
so you're suggesting that the idea of convert or die is just
It's
a
a
European
Eurasian
idea.
concept.
There was
It's a
nowhere
Eurasian
outside of
concept.
Europe where the idea of convert or die was prevalent. Because if that's what you're saying, I'm gonna gladly disagree with you.
Can you show me?
I don't even think that that's the argument.
I
Well, hold
let
on,
y'all
I
hold
don't
on,
finish.
think
hold
I should
on,
have to
hold
show
on.
you. I don't
Time
think that's
out.
something I should have to
Can you
show you.
show me? No, because your two examples was
You haven't
Christianity
shown
and
me
Islam.
either. You haven't
So I
shown it. You
slapped
just said
those
it.
off of the
You
table.
haven't shown it. Have you shown it, or have you
Hold
just
on.
said it?
I slapped those
Why
off of
is
the
it that I'm
table.
the only one that got to show it? You haven't shown anything. You've just said it like I said it.
Well, why didn't Cyrus do that?
Who?
Cyrus is one
Cyrus.
person. Hey, all right, look, I'm not doing this. This is not
I
turning
mean,
into
hey.
Bible.
I mean, he
This is
did it.
not turning. This is not turning
That's
into
not a Bible.
Christianity
That's
and
not a
Islam.
Bible question.
This is not turning
Wait,
into
what y'all
Christianity.
talking
Cyrus is
about?
Blue done took
is
it to
Zoroastrian.
Christianity. Well,
I done stepped
American,
He
away
did
because I'm
that.
trying to get up out this house.
He did that.
American Dream turned it into Christianity and Islam, and Blue, when he hear that, it's death to all Abrahamic, so it turned into that. No,
And
look,
how?
hey, look.
And how Christians and Islam are a part of white supremacy, I have no idea. When I don't even know if those people. I have no idea. Did these people even consider themselves white?
They conquered.
Did those Muslims consider themselves to be white? And if not, how is this an example of white supremacy? Did the Christians during the Crusades, consider themselves white? And if not, how is that an example of white supremacy?
White supremacy are not for white. You can be a non-white person
and support white
supremacy. Don't get it twisted.
So when the Christians went out on their crusade saying they were converting people on behalf of Jesus the Christ and on behalf of Christianity, they were lying. They were really doing it on behalf of white supremacy. So you're saying the crusades, the Christian crusades and the Muslim crusades had nothing to do with their religion. You're saying the Muslim crusades and the Christian crusades had nothing to do with religion. It was all about white supremacy. And these people didn't even consider themselves white. Okay, that makes a lot of nonsense to me.
It was hold on. Let me tell you how. It was all about conquering Aboriginal culture and coming in today what you believe is modernism, where you get people that believe that, hey, this is right here the way that you should be living and the way that you should actually be, and that the way that other people live is more primitive and it's looked down on and it's something that's able to be laughed at. So, and that's what happened, bro. So other people's cultures is disrespected and their culture happens to be the only way. So,
let me tap in, Blue. Let me tap in.
Go ahead.
So, and I hear where you're coming from, American Dream, but I gotta go ahead and give you some facts. So when we deal with the Papal Bull or dumb diverses, when we deal with the League of Nations, or what we know to be the United Nations, or when we deal with all of these various edicts, like Sis Melanated Goddess brought up the Berlin Conference. When we look at all of these different edicts or different rules that were passed, this is the creation of the systemic white supremacy or systemic racism that we're talking about. And the unintentional result may be that it now trickles down to people who don't necessarily look like a white supremacist, but still have to support white supremacy because the system has now been put in place. So for instance, with the United Nations, right? If you do not conform to many of their beliefs or to what they want to see happen, you can now not join that council. And by the way, I heard y'all the other day destroy what the United Nations is, all right? Do not talk about somebody being a charter member of the United Nations, but say they're not a member of the United Nations. That is completely false and wrong. There are 6 organs of the United Nations, right? And one of those, the main, is the General Assembly. You can be taken off the United Nations Security Panel or the United Nations Security Council and still be a part of the United Nations. If you're a charter member, which means you now have entered into the charter, you are a part of the United Nations. There is no separation of, oh, I'm a charter member of the United Nations. When it says that Saudi Arabia is a charter member of the United Nations, you are now a part of the United Nations General Assembly. That's just a side note. But the reason that this becomes important, Brother American Dream, and now I understand where you're coming from. And I can see where you're trying to say, okay, this removes responsibility. And so what we're trying to say to you is, the systems have been put in place to where especially in Western America, specifically in various parts of Europe and the United States of America, the systems have been put in place to where all of their particular belief systems and ideology permeates every facet of society. That doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility to train and teach our children how to properly behave, how to do things like that. But there is such a traumatic experience that has been a part of the American Black or the American Negro, however you want to say it, that it cannot even be quantified. It cannot even be identified without first addressing systemic racism and how it perpetuates the traumatic cycle in every aspect of their life, from the legal system, from the educational system, and all 9 to 10 or 11, 12, 13 areas of people activity. Because in every area of people activity, they have permeated and created a system that is advantageous for the white man and not advantageous for the black man unless that black man now converts or conforms to their ideology. And in order for us to actually fix that, we have to talk about what it means to participate in this system, but still maintain your identity. That's really what people are clamoring for. That's what the argument is. How do I maintain my identity, but still have to participate in this system in order to fix my community? And however we start to define what that black community is. But to say as though that there is no, all right, Mel, I'm gonna holler at you. But to say that there is no, and shout out to the sister Melanated Goddess, she gotta go. I want to give you a chance to close out, Mel. Do you want to say anything real quick? I'll shut up. Is there anything you want to say before you leave?
This is definitely an interesting conversation. And like I said before, I do agree with some of the American Born. Is that the name?
American Dream.
American Dream. I do agree with some of his points. And I kind of when I do the work in the community, I operate from that perspective of accountability, of helping our youth to open their eyes to certain systemic things and not to play into it and not to kind of go counter to the cycle that's already in place. And the reality is you have to step out of the cycle in order to not continue it on. So it's awesome to hear brothers build on this. And you know what, if you are recognizing Family Day today, take this conversation to your family. That's I plan on doing that. And we're gonna be tipsy and we're gonna be talking about white supremacy. Blessings to blessings to everybody, and enjoy your day. Peace.
JC Queen, you know what it is. Shout out to that sister, man. She always brings excellent perspective to the panel. But I will say this to the brother American Dream: no one's negating responsibility. Just like we should never be in a space where we negate systemic racism. No one is saying that systemic racism is the only causal issue either for where we are. But it does play a huge role. And now we have to change how we act and how we respond. We have to take responsibility in our community. But we also have to take into mind that there is a system that does not want to see Black bodies survive. When you understand the definition of white supremacy, it's not just only white people, it's anybody that buys into the ideological situation or belief that white is the best in anything. Watch this, specifically Black and Jewish people. That's the definition. Specifically Black and Jewish people are inferior, but anything else, anything other than white is inferior, but especially towards Black and Jewish people. And because those people have been able to enact laws and put together a system with that mindset, whether it was everyone's intention or not, the result, since you talk about now the systematic or the systemic result, the result has been the creation of a system that is discriminatory towards Black people, especially here in the United States. And I yield.
Yeah, if I can just quickly give my closing words. Got to spend some of this Thanksgiving with the family. But what I would say is, again, I think taking responsibility and claiming systemic racism are kind of is contradictory. I think we have to, if we're going to take responsibility, we're going to have to take responsibility. I do think that white supremacy does play a big role in what's happening to us, but the reason it plays such a big role is because it's not real, right? But we act as if it is, and I think that that's a major part of our stumbling block. It's as if, just because something isn't real doesn't necessarily mean it can't affect your life. And I think our thinking that it's real is really what is holding us back. And I would challenge us that if we are going to be serious about taking responsibility, the first place we may want to start is in avoiding thinking that white supremacy is something that's real. I think that that is holding us back more than anything else. And then after that, we may want to start talking about really and truly what are going to be the ideas that we're going to build our community around. But this idea of white supremacy is not a good idea to build a black community around. It just defeats the purpose. So yeah, so on that note, I would say, thank you so much for allowing me to even come up on your platform. Y'all are very kind, and y'all have been a lot nicer to me than I've heard y'all be to other people. So I'm really grateful for that as well. So
you're
y'all have added
intelligent.
to my reasons to be thankful. So thanks for that.
You're intelligent, brother, and I would love for you to join these panels more often, right?
Absolutely.
And there will be other people that maybe push back a little more, but I enjoyed it, and I pray, my religion, whatever. But I do hope that you are that you will continue to be a part of these contributions. I thought your perspective was great, and I appreciate you and applaud you for continuing to conversate with us.
Indeed, respect.
Yeah, absolutely. Much respect. Much
Yeah, I'll
respect.
just close out with this, man. Yeah, definitely. I think the mere fact that folks is getting ready to go celebrate Thanksgiving, I think that's proof enough of white supremacy.
Hey, for the record, I'm not.
I
I'm
don't
gonna
even
point that out.
understand
Ain't no
how.
turkeys, none of that in this house. But I hear
That's
you.
funny
Yeah,
as hell.
so
Go ahead and
I'm
take
just
that
gonna go
shot,
ahead and
bro.
put that
Go
out
ahead and
there.
take that shot, bro.
I just want to put that out there. So y'all go ahead and continue on in defeat. But anyway, but nah, I appreciate though the brother challenge and the conversation in general though, and um, having giving some pushback to the norm. So there's nothing wrong with that at all. Appreciate it. Appreciate it if you come back through.
Yeah.
And also, man, I appreciate Elder Yara, man, holding it down, bro. Great panel, great discussion.
Hey man, glad
As
you
usual.
joined, Blue. Great input, man, as always, and definitely added value to the panel discussion, man. Shout out to the champ, Anonymous Hebrew. I think that's it. Dizali, are you still with us, brother?
Yeah, I'm still here. And to close out, I'd just like to say thank you for the great conversation this morning. So much needed topic. I enjoyed my time here, and I just want to say that acknowledging something is not saying that we have to use it as an absolute overall excuse for everything. And with that, thanks everyone, and thanks everyone who I conversated with.
Peace, peace, peace.
Peace.
Shout out to the champ, Anonymous Hebrew, man, for hitting the panel, man. Always add great insight and value to the conversation, man. Anything we doing, man. You want to close us out, bro, a little bit?
I'll just say this: respect to everybody, man. This was a great conversation. We are moving into space where we are being forced to have these deeper, more intellectual, serious conversations, and I appreciate that. When we move forward, I hope that we can do more like this, where we are all just trying to move into a space where we show that we're trying to be responsible in our communities. One of the things that we do when we have therapy sessions, like when we have family therapy sessions with different people that I'm doing with, stuff like that, the main thing that we put on the floor at the beginning is we're all family and we want what's best for each other. And that's going to look different from how I think or different from how you think or whatever. So when we have these conversations, man, hopefully the goal is always to move towards a position of being better and being grateful and moving forward our community. We just have different beliefs on how to get there. And the more we have these conversations, the more we'll be able to iron out some of the differences and the disagreements. From my perspective, we can't live and rest in a space. I agree with American Dream in this. Can't live and rest in a space where we say white supremacy is the end all be all and we can't overcome it. But I also don't believe that we can shy away from it. We can't live in a space where we say it doesn't exist and that there's nothing to fight. No, both of those things are not diametrically opposed. In other words, we're not in a space where we can't say racism, white supremacy exists, but that's not what's going to define how we move forward. But it does, however, have to be in the conversation because we need to know exactly what we're fighting against and the best ways to overcome their different systems of keeping us in a position of detriment and in a position where we're constantly at odds with each other. And so I love the conversation. I appreciate you, Elder Yara, for bringing this out. This is a great convo. I will try to hit these whenever I can. Y'all forgive me when I'm not on the panels, man. I'm extremely busy right now. We're getting into my most busy time of year. So, but it's love for all of y'all, man. Shout out to the league, SVDL and nothing, fam. You know, I love all y'all brothers. If you are participating in that holiday, you know, I hope everything is safe with you and your family. Me and mine, we ain't doing it, but to each his own, you know. I love y'all, and I hope y'all be blessed, man. Peace, Elder.
Hey, shalom, Mark. Hey, again, man, shout out to everybody that came through, man. Shout out to Nyame, American Dream. Shout out to Melanated Goddess. Shout out to Out the Blue. Shout out to the Zali, man, for joining the panel. Again, shout out to the champ again. Man, and a big shout out, man, to Melvin, bro. Judge Melvin in the chat, man, holding it down as usual, man. Man, we appreciate you, Judge Melvin. Again, I saw Judge Free Spirit in the chat as well earlier. Shout out to the judge, Free Spirit, Judge Erica. Also, shout out to the chat, man. Shout out to the chat, man. Solar Vision Debate League, man. Shout out to Solomon. And we're gonna close this thing out, man. As I said, if you are celebrating this day, you know, just peace and blessings on your family, that you be safe in your travels. Hey, and to the league, man. SVDL or nothing, baby.